Chapter 967. In the mountains, Chu Feng was picking up the spoils of war. When he picked up the sorcerer god's scarlet bow, he staggered and suddenly fell to the ground. His body trembled and couldn't get up. There was a terrifying curse on it. It was a weapon passed down from ancient times and hadn't been destroyed even after a long time. Chu Feng struggled a few times and fell to the ground again. You dare touch the sorcerer god's things? Hey, you're quite bold. Unfortunately, you still fell for it. A voice came from the distance. Although this was the underground world, it was no different from the surface. Two divine beasts walked out of a mountain forest. The one who spoke was a snow-white dragon-horned beast. It was snow-white like a Pegasus, and had a pair of dragon horns on its head. Moreover, there were 3 pairs of snow-white wings on its ribs, flowing with divine-level energy. The other divine beast was very tall. It was a hoe with jet-black fur and a strong physique. Its wide mouth was filled with fangs, and its body was emitting black light. It was quite ferocious. Get rid of him immediately. This Een spirit is too terrifying. This is a rare opportunity. If we miss it, no one in this world will be able to keep him in check. Heiho said. They had already evolved into divine beasts, and each controlled an abyss not far from the first forbidden area. That was why they rushed over as soon as the divine battle broke out. I have no enmity with you. Do you really want to fight? Chu Feng asked while lying on the ground. There is no enmity. However, you are so powerful that you are a serious threat to us and have destroyed the balance of this world. In addition, we are not on good terms with the vermilion bird bloodline. I heard that the young vermilion bird is with you. Therefore, you should just die. The dragon-horned beast laughed. A dazzling radiance burst out from between its horns. That was lightning. It transformed into a resplendent divine spear and pierced toward the space between Chu Feng's brows. It was a fatal attack from the very beginning. At the same time, that Heiho also roared and opened its bloody mouth full of order runes. It swept toward Chu Feng like a vast ocean. The 2 divine beasts were very decisive and attacked immediately. Sigh. Chu Feng sighed. With a whoosh, he disappeared from where he was. Then, he used the little 6 rays of time technique. His sword light was like a rainbow as he fought fiercely with them. In reality, it couldn't be considered an intense battle. He was now at the divine general level, so as soon as he took action, the 2 divine beasts were alarmed. They roared out, and then divine blood sprayed out from their bodies. They were seriously injured, almost having their heads removed. The injuries on their necks were terrifying. Are you pretending to be cursed? They were shocked and angry. Otherwise, how can I determine whether or not you should be killed? Chu Feng said calmly. He had long sensed that there were gods spying on them in the dark. Even though the 2 divine beasts had secret treasures to conceal their auras, they still couldn't hide from his keen divine senses. We are willing to surrender. Please show mercy. Chu Feng hesitated. Should he take them to the netherworld? Soon, he shook his head. These were 2 gods, and they were very difficult to control. If he was even the slightest bit careless, he might suffer a backlash, especially since the people around him hadn't reached the domain of divinity. Kill! Heiting shouted and fought fiercely. However, reality was very cruel. Even the 2 divine beasts were far from being a match for the divine general level Chu Feng. Very soon, large wounds appeared on their bodies, and they were about to be beheaded. I'm willing to be your mount. Imagine riding a divine beast and walking in the world. All living beings will be shocked and worship you. Even the gods of the vicious beast plateau can't achieve this step, shouted the dragon-horned beast. It lowered its head to indicate that it was willing to surrender. Chu Feng wasn't moved. He could clearly feel the hidden killing intent of these 2 divine beasts. They weren't willing to surrender, but they were pressured and didn't want to be killed. Keeping this kind of mount was also a future trouble. He had just become a god and didn't have that many beast-taming methods yet. How about this? Try to escape and let me see how strong your legs are, said Chu Feng. He wanted to return to the Yin realm and then go to the primal chaos universe to fight the gods of the Yang realm. If these two vicious beasts were fast enough, they could stay. The two divine beasts turned around and ran after hearing what was said. This was a joint escape. It would be better if they could escape, but if they couldn't, they would just lower their heads and become his mount first. They would think of a way to kill him later. Too slow. Chu Feng shook his head. After unfolding his sword wings, he caught up in a flash and cut off their path forward. It was as though fragments of time were lingering around him. Bang! Hei Ting was very decisive and unyielding. Before Chu Feng could express anything, he self-detonated first and wanted to drag Chu Feng down with him. As a divine beast, his divine senses were naturally very sharp. He sensed Chu Feng's killing intent. However, the black energy mass was confined by Chu Feng before it could spread. He used the little 6 rays of time technique to frantically absorb it. All the divinity granules and ancestral Tao matter were swept away. The dragon-horned beast was overwhelmed with shock. This Yin spirit was too powerful and much stronger than them. Even self-detonation couldn't kill him. In the end, it was also decapitated by a sword and died a violent death. Since they couldn't truly pledge allegiance and the two divine beasts had enmity with the vermilion bird bloodline, he didn't show any mercy. They wanted to kill Chu Feng when they first arrived here. Chu Feng sat cross-legged here and was wrapped in silvery white light and black light. After killing the two divine beasts, he had absorbed enough divine matter and his strength had increased a step further. At this moment, he was actually somewhat afraid. This little 6 rays of time technique was too heaven-defying. His strength had increased too quickly. This kind of speed scared even himself. He became a god in 100 years and broke into the divine general domain. This was really shocking. Chu Feng's strength was increasing, but his heart was very heavy. This kind of growth speed made him very worried. But when he thought of the ruined road, he let out a light sigh and observed the seed planted in his body. With his current self as the strange soil, he was waiting for the birth of a divine fetus and his new self to be reborn. That seed was like a tiny golden pill suspended in his body. It merged with his flesh and soul light and took root there. It was obviously much more resplendent than before because it had received the nourishment of a large amount of divine matter. It was performing extremely well. Chu Feng walked into the forbidden area to find the stone fox. He consulted it and told it about his worries. He truly felt that his evolution was too rapid and his strength had increased too quickly. The stone fox nodded. It knew the little 6 rays of time technique and deeply understood that this kind of method was heaven-defying. It was a kind of terrifying mutant technique that could allow one to rise in a short period of time. It was somewhat demonic. Otherwise, why would that person be called the evil lord of the 6 rays of time back then? Even the powerhouses of the Yang realm were afraid of him, and several people joined forces to kill him. At the same time, it told Chu Feng not to worry too much. The reason why the Yin realm's cultivation was slow was because the laws were incomplete and it was also suppressed by the abyss. Chu Feng had told him about the situation in the Yin realm, and the lame celestial venerable had made various reasonable judgments. It said that the limit of the Yin realm was the peak of the Illuminator realm, and that it was impossible to become a god. At the same time, because of the upper limit, suppression, and incomplete order, it was difficult to cultivate after reaching the saint level. The laws in the foreign realm were more complete. Hence, after reaching the saint level, the cultivation speed was much faster than in the Yin realm. With the help of the little 6 rays of time technique, Chu Feng's rapid advancement was also within expectations. Chu Feng asked it if the laws in the Yang realm were complete and order was evident. Would cultivation be faster there? Yes, the Yin realm you're in can be considered a deduction of the Dharma ending age. The Yang realm is indeed a cultivation holy land with perfect order. The stone fox nodded. It told Chu Feng that no world was as good as imagined. The cultivation speed in the Yang realm was indeed much faster, but it wouldn't be too ridiculous. However, one thing was certain. The evolvers in the Yang realm were generally stronger than those in the Yin realm. This was because the Yang realm's great Tao was undamaged and the laws of heaven and earth were dense. This caused everyone to be baptized by more order runes when they broke through. Of course, there are also disadvantages. For example, in the Yang realm, even golden arhats can't fly. They'll be suppressed by perfect order. In some places, quasi-saints couldn't even fly in the sky or burrow underground. This made Chu Feng speechless, but he was also very curious. He kept asking for guidance, wanting to understand more about the Yang realm. He already knew that even saints couldn't destroy planets in the Yang realm. If they really tried to attack, they'd be obliterated by the planet's will instead. In the Yang realm, where the laws were powerful, the planet's will would be very terrifying. I heard that the Yang realm is vast and boundless. Do the various races also inhabit their own vital planets? Chu Feng asked. No. In the starry sky of the universe, every vital planet and so on is just their vegetable garden. In the eyes of some ancient races that have existed for millions and millions of years, it's not precious at all. You'll understand when you go there. After that, it stopped talking. Although the stone fox wasn't very cooperative and was unwilling to say much, Chu Feng still understood a lot of things. I'm finally going to leave. Before I leave, I'll make a trip to the Vicious Beast Plateau and the Abyss respectively. Chu Feng left. Since the three gods of the Vicious Beast Plateau came to kill him, how could he just leave like this? He wanted to plunder the homes of the gods. Of course, he naturally wouldn't let the abyss go. Whoosh! Chu Feng disappeared. His speed was too fast. He tore apart the void and arrived at the Vicious Beast Plateau directly. At his current level, he could already be considered the foreign realm's #1 expert. This world could also be considered to have declined for a very long time. Many eras didn't have a divine king appear, so he could now look down on this world with disdain. Everything went very smoothly. After Chu Feng arrived, he didn't resist at all. It was as if he had entered an uninhabited land. He made his way in and opened up the abodes of the martial god, the dark moon goddess, and the witch god. Those so-called god servants and followers could only tremble in fear under the suppression of his divine might. There were still gods on the Vicious Beast Plateau, but they already knew of his battle accomplishments. None of them dared to stand out and instead felt very uneasy. Chu Feng sighed. He was rather unhappy because he didn't have a single divine medicine that he wanted to pluck the most. 100 years ago, the Vicious Beast Plateau and the Abyss started a war. Both sides fought for more than 10 years and many experts perished. The gods that didn't die were also heavily injured. In the end, they plucked all the divine medicines to treat their injuries. This kind of thing grew too slowly. Only now did tender shoots emerge. He had the heart to dig them away, but after some thought, the strange substances in this world were too dense. Even divine medicines might carry that kind of attribute. It didn't matter if he consumed it himself, but if he really planted it on earth, it might bring about harm. Forget it. There are divine medicines and divine trees on earth too. They'll gradually grow in the end as the world recovers. Of course, the Yin realm universe lacked the nourishment of Yang Qi. The effects of divine medicines were far inferior to the foreign realm. As for the Yang realm, they were even more lacking. In the end, Chu Feng unexpectedly discovered a scroll of scriptures. After studying it carefully, he was overjoyed. This was suspected to be the Tao race's breathing technique. This was found in the martial god's cave residence. In reality, it wasn't obtained by this generation's martial god. It was left behind by an ancient god in the past. Just like the Buddhist race's breathing technique in the vermilion bird's nest, this was also a similar opportunity. In ancient times, a genius from the Tao race entered the foreign realm from damning Pure Land. In the end, he was forced to rely on a divine king on the vicious beast plateau due to the pressure of life and death. One had to know that the upper limit of the Een realm made it impossible to become a god. As a result, the restriction that the Tao race powerhouse left in the soul light of his own disciple couldn't stop that divine king at all. He easily broke through it and obtained this breathing technique. Chu Feng was very excited. He left this place and went to sweep through the abyss. Unfortunately, his harvest wasn't great. In the end, he returned to the first forbidden area and found the stone fox. He showed the Tao race's breathing technique to it. Not bad. This is a secret that the Tao race doesn't pass on to others. It can let you cultivate to the illumination realm. Even though it's only the first chapter, it's still incomparably precious. The Tao race's breathing technique is enough to rank among the top few in the Yang realm. The lame celestial venerable's eyes were actually somewhat brilliant. His stone eyes shone. Even though this scroll of scriptures was only at the reflection realm, he was still very interested. After studying it for a long time, he finally helped Chu Feng revise it and get rid of a few flaws within it. His master originally had a close relationship with the Tao race. As a result, he had collected a lot of various incomplete texts related to the Tao race's breathing technique. That almighty master of his had always been researching the few top-notch breathing technique. He couldn't obtain them, but he always yearned for them. His heart was very conflicted. I didn't expect to obtain it here. I originally wanted to go to the Tao race to get it myself after returning to the Een realm universe. Chu Feng sighed. This was his true intention. He was prepared to go to the Yang realm, so he naturally had to make ample preparations. He had already obtained many top-notch breathing techniques from the Een realm, such as the quasi-immortal race, the Buddhist race, the undead silkworm race. More than 10 of them were collected by the people of the Yang realm, but in the end they fell into his hands. Now he was in a good mood. He knew that once he entered the Yang realm, it was basically impossible to obtain the breathing techniques of the various races. They were all secrets that wouldn't be passed on. Rather than that, he might as well work harder in the Een realm and collect some incomplete texts of the Supreme Orthodoxy's breathing technique. Senior, since we're about to leave, why don't we work harder and plunder the other fortunes in the first forbidden area? Chu Feng smiled apologetically. The Sure Who's face darkened. Go to hell. You still want to use me as a meat shield? Besides, you and the little vermilion bird are the ones leaving, not me. How can I leave you behind and go on my way alone? That's not my style. If you want to leave, then we'll leave together. I have a way to bring you out of this cage. Even if that almighty master of yours sets a restriction on you, he can't stop us. Are you sure? It would be impossible for the Sure Who not to break free from this kind of fate. I'm sure, but the premise is that you have to help me one more time and make me strong enough. Only then will I have the confidence to bring you along. Otherwise, I'm not very confident. Chu Feng tricked him. In the end, the Sure Who clenched his teeth and became his meat shield again. Bang! Chu Feng didn't stand on ceremony. After carefully studying the terrain and having a simple discussion with the Sure Who, he once again smashed him into the depths of the forbidden area like a stone. Little brat, can't you be a little more gentle? I really want to slap you to death. The lame Empyrean's face darkened. He felt as if he was throwing a stone to test the way. He really didn't care when he smashed it, as if he was using it as a stone hammer to smash divine cores. It was too casual, making him angry. Chu Feng laughed dryly. I made a mistake. I was distracted and made a mistake. Please forgive me. In the end, the lame Empyrean groaned again and again. He couldn't hold himself back anymore and cried out in pain. He was attacked by the order of the forbidden area. He cursed Chu Feng for being too unkind. He said it would end quickly, so why was this brat so reluctant to come out after diving in? In the end, Chu Feng's heart raced. He returned with a fruitful harvest. He picked up 5 divine medicines and more than 20 divine cores, some damaged and some intact. In addition, he also picked up 3 damaged divine king cores. Brat, are you done? Alright, I'm out. Let's hurry up and leave. If we don't leave, we'll suffer retribution. Chu Feng felt that he had obtained too many things and was afraid of being struck by lightning. The little vermilion bird was dumbstruck. With so many divine cores, it could definitely increase Chu Feng's and its strength by a large amount. It even suspected that Chu Feng wouldn't become a divine king, right? 100 years of cultivation in the foreign land has come to an end. I have swept through the first forbidden area and obtained good fortune. Today I will step into the sky. Chu Feng pretended to be deep in thought. However, he would look up at the sky from time to time, afraid that lightning would strike him. At this time, he suddenly heard laughter. He turned around and saw a hunchbacked old man appear from the depths of the forbidden area, smiling at him. This wasn't the first time he had seen this kind of smile, but it still made his hair stand on end. Let's go! Chapter 968. Chu Feng escaped from the Forbidden Land. He was fearful of that hunchbacked old man from the bottom of his heart. That was a psychic gray substance that had actually taken on a human form. He didn't know why, but when he saw that seemingly peaceful smile, he truly felt a chill run down his spine from head to toe. He felt apprehensive and horrified. If he had a choice, he really didn't want to see this hunchbacked old man. Therefore, he remained silent along the way and escaped from the underground world. He stayed far away from the abyss and only stopped when he approached Vicious Beast Plateau. "Senior, did you see that gray-clothed old man?" At this time, Chu Feng asked the lame celestial venerable. The stone fox didn't make a sound along the way, as if he was also fearful, and didn't say a word. As for the little vermilion bird, his bright red feathers were fluffy and standing on end. He was somewhat afraid and his large eyes were filled with panic. He still hadn't calmed down his nervous emotions. "I saw him. Are you afraid?" the stone fox asked him. "How can a true Prince Charming be afraid? He can't be a coward no matter what." Chu Feng was there with a golden spear in one hand and a sharp divine sword in the other. Divine-level energy filled the air and shook the entire wasteland. A dead duck is stubborn. If he was calm enough, he wouldn't care so much and would be very peaceful, the stone fox said unhurriedly after shooting him a glance. "Don't talk about me. What about you? Didn't you run with me? What's the background of that hunchbacked old man?" Chu Feng wanted to know the secrets of the first forbidden land more and more. The lame celestial venerable said indifferently, "If he saw my true body, he would cry. He's just an old servant." The stone fox's attitude made Chu Feng unhappy. He also put on a calm expression and said, "Did you see his expression when he saw me? He was smiling at me. That's his charisma. Seeing you cry and seeing me smile." The stone fox was putting on the appearance of an otherworldly expert, appearing calm and indifferent. He wanted to use this contrast between crying and smiling to highlight his aloofness. In the end, the lame celestial venerable's face fell after hearing such shameless words. Even the little vermilion bird was speechless. She tilted her head and looked at the two of them with her large ruby-like eyes. Chu Feng said it in a relaxed manner, but his heart was heavy. When that hunchbacked old man saw him, he actually revealed that kind of smile, which made him feel extremely uneasy. Even now, his back was still shivering. He was more and more afraid of the strange substances. If he had the chance, he would definitely get rid of everything in his body. He was even more determined to walk the path of ruin. One day, he would transform into a divine fetus, cut off all the drawbacks, and step onto the path of the strongest. It was just that doing this was too cruel to her old self. It could even be said that it was too cruel to her current self. Every time she thought about it, her heart would palpitate for some reason. She felt that there were some things that she hadn't thought through, and her mind was restless. Forget it. Let's not think too much about it. Nothing is absolute in this world. Perhaps I will embark on another path, Chu Feng mumbled. Now, he was finally going to leave. He didn't have any reluctance to leave the other side. This world was full of strange matter. Even though the little vermilion bird didn't cultivate any special techniques, being born in this world was still contaminated. In the words of the lame Empyrean, this was the sorrow of all living beings in this world. This was a world that made people despair. Senior, don't you want to say anything more? Chu Feng asked. There's nothing to say. It won't be too late to understand it when you can truly charge into the depths of the Forbidden Land one day. Hu shook his head. He didn't want to say anything more. He was very apprehensive about the so-called First Forbidden Land. In reality, Chu Feng also knew that even an Empyrean would die if they were to forcefully attack such a forbidden land. This time, he only searched the borders of the 9 heavens. He didn't dare to enter deep into it. You can be considered lucky. For countless years, no one has entered the 9 heavens to risk their lives and search for a chance at a new life. Hu sighed. This time, Chu Feng obtained 4 talisman papers. In his opinion, this was the greatest harvest. It would make the Empyreans of the Yang realm, the ancestors of the sects, and the others jealous. Unless it was a special time, those ancient existences and those top-notch powerhouses of the Yang realm wouldn't forcefully attack those forbidden lands under normal circumstances. It had been too long since anyone had entered the first forbidden land of the other side. In the end, that hunchbacked old man was forced to hand over almost all of the talisman papers. According to what Hu said, these talisman papers were originally located in the most central area of the Forbidden Land. Chu Feng immediately understood why the talisman papers were still so precious even though there were so many forbidden lands in the Yang realm. Next, Chu Feng sat cross-legged on the wasteland and directly began to cut the divine cores in his hands with a sharp sword. He planned to absorb all of them before returning to the Yang realm. These things contained some strange substances and weren't suitable to be brought back. It was best to dispose of them in this world. Among them, there were a few divine beasts that didn't cultivate special technique. Chu Feng picked them out and gave them to the little vermilion bird. Senior, do you want to use yourself as the sky overturning seal and smash these divine cores for the little vermilion bird? Stay at one side. Who couldn't restrain his anger. This brat still dared to mention this matter. What sky overturning seal? He was clearly using it as a stone hammer. In the end, Chu Feng incessantly cut and absorbed all kinds of divine cores. There were more than 20 of them in his hands, and there were even incomplete divine king cores among them. This was a terrifying increase. He fully unleashed the little 6 paths of time technique. Not long after, the heavenly tribulation arrived. All of this was because he had absorbed too many divinity granules and attracted the punishment. Fortunately, he didn't absorb them all in one go. Every time he absorbed a bit, he would wait for a period of time and look at the sky. Lightning streaked across the sky and thunder descended on the plateau, but no one dared to disturb him. Everyone already knew who was undergoing the tribulation. Now, Chu Feng had absolute strength and confidence. He didn't need to find a place for seclusion. He wasn't afraid of the external threats or the divine beings of this world. He could look down on the foreign realm. When he absorbed the 3 incomplete divine king cores one day, he would only be one step away from stepping into the divine king domain. Recently, he had been evolving rapidly. There were all kinds of mucus and blood on his body every day. That was caused by his intense transformation, and his metabolism was incomparably terrifying. Now, all of his cells were astonishingly active and contained frightening energy. His internal organs glowed and his bones trembled with the sound of thunder. His corporeal body was flawless and had evolved to an incomparably shocking level. Unfortunately, the 3 divine king cores were too badly damaged. If they were a bit more complete, he would be able to advance a step further. During these days, the little vermilion bird had also advanced at lightning speed. It had obtained the nourishment of several incomplete divine cores and evolved rapidly. It had finally entered the divine realm. Chu Feng glanced sideways at the stone fox. When he asked the stone fox for guidance on how to break through the realm at the critical moment, the lame deity avoided answering. In the end, when the little vermilion bird faced this problem, it was gradually enlightened and actively guided him. But Chu Feng was also a bit worried. The little vermilion bird wasn't young at all. It was already over 230 years old. But even now it was still incomparably naive. No matter how powerful it was in this state, it would still suffer greatly in the future. Its path is different from yours. Even now you are still unwilling to reincarnate, but it is destined to go to the afterlife. The stone fox told him the details without hiding anything. It wanted the little vermilion bird to temporarily maintain her innocent heart and comprehend the divine realm. That was why it didn't hesitate to enlighten her and explain the Tao to her in order to help her comprehend thoroughly. It was because in the stone fox's arrangements, the little vermilion bird had to start anew in the end. Everything she did in this life was to accumulate. After arriving in the netherworld, let it experience the world of mortals and deceive each other. Either way, realms are suppressed there, so it can't become a deity. It can't cultivate even if it wants to. Give it enough time to experience. When they were in the foreign realm, the stone fox believed that all time here was precious. Chu Feng suddenly understood. He didn't say anything else. Now that the little vermilion bird had the talisman paper, she was going to reincarnate from the netherworld and enter the world of the living. The stone fox spoke clearly. Even if she didn't cultivate any special techniques, the strange matter within her body had already accumulated to a certain degree. It had no way of helping her dissolve it right now. We will meet again in the world of the living in the end. Reincarnation is a rare opportunity for many disciples of great powers, and they yearn for it immensely. If they can start their lives over and reconstruct themselves, that is the greatest opportunity and fortune. Chu Feng saw the tears in the little vermilion bird's eyes. She was reluctant to part, so he comforted her like this. In the end, they went on their way. There was no time to waste. Chu Feng had succeeded perfectly in the foreign realm, so there was no need for him to stay any longer. Remember, the netherworld is very dangerous. You must seal yourself and never reveal the fluctuations of divine energy. Otherwise, you will be swallowed by the abyss and die miserably. Chu Feng emphasized again and again that he was afraid something big would happen. He was very serious. A single mistake would cause even him to die miserably. He didn't want to be swallowed by the abyss. Don't be too worried and afraid. Back then, even the Heavenly Venerable's decree wasn't activated and could appear in the netherworld universe. The great martial Heavenly Venerable's Tao body was killed because he was too tyrannical. He dared to cause trouble near the abyss. Even if he suppressed his realm, it wouldn't work. He was killed and some of his followers were also killed. Chu Feng took out the soul bell and let the little vermilion bird enter. He also prepared to stuff the stone fox in. Are you sure I can go there? The stone fox didn't believe him. Senior, you must believe me. This is the first step to breaking the imprisonment of that almighty master of yours. If I can bring you into the netherworld universe, your turning point might come. In the end, the stone fox agreed and was stuffed into the soul bell by Chu Feng. Chu Feng put on an act and stuffed his corporeal body inside, leaving only his soul light outside. After that, a priceless magnetic marrow appeared in his hand. He was prepared to use it to block the mouth of the soul bell and completely isolate it from the outside world. The magnetic marrow could be considered a rare treasure. It was something that domain researchers yearned for even in their dreams. When Chu Feng examined the spoils of war he brought out from the god's abode, he unexpectedly discovered it. This thing could isolate everything. Even the spiritual power of a god couldn't penetrate it. He reckoned that the lame heavenly venerable's soul light couldn't penetrate the magnetic marrow either. Moreover, he even scared the stone fox and said, "Senior, you must be careful. After all, you were once a heavenly venerable and your master left various restrictions in your body. You are more dangerous than anyone else when crossing the two realms. You must stabilize yourself and use the stone embryo to protect your soul light. Even if your stone body disintegrates, it's still good to leave your spirit behind. It's better than dying right away. Little bastard, do you have confidence in yourself or not? This old man isn't going with you." The lame heavenly venerable was actually very afraid of death. Otherwise, he wouldn't have stubbornly persisted in the foreign realm so tenaciously. Therefore, he was a little scared when he heard Chu Feng's threat. "It's fine. At most, I'll make you lose a few arms and legs and damage half of your stone body. I'll definitely be able to preserve most of your soul light. Get off the carriage. This old man isn't taking this carriage. I'm not going to the Yang realm with you. It's too late. We've already set off. Senior, we should get moving." Chu Feng stuffed the magnetic marrow inside with a clang and sealed it thoroughly. After that, he shook the soul bell with all his strength, causing it to shake violently. The stone fox was scared inside the soul bell, but it could only stare helplessly. It was very afraid of death and decisively withdrew all of its spirit to concentrate at the core of its stone body. It didn't dare to probe further. Chu Feng used his soul light to shake the soul bell with all his might and hurried to the place where he had agreed to meet the demon ancestral cauldron. He called out to it and obtained a response. During this process, he had long since taken out the stone box and stored himself and the soul bell inside. He began to prepare to return and pass through this special world node. The stone box crossed over with a hum and erupted with terrifying rays of light along the way. It passed through the boundary membrane and smoothly returned to Mount Eternal. Chu Feng had returned to the Yang realm. The stone box dimmed in a split second and returned to its original state. This sect's most precious treasure was very ordinary on ordinary days. Even someone as strong as the lame heavenly venerable had never noticed it because he didn't sense any abnormalities. He had always overlooked it. "I'm back. I've finally returned. I wonder how the Yang realm is now and how Earth is now." Chu Feng clenched his fists tightly. Chapter 969. Chu Feng felt the vicissitudes of life. Although a year had passed in the netherworld, he had indeed experienced 100 years in the foreign realm. Those scenes were right before his eyes. 100 years of time had passed just like that. It was like a great dream, causing him to be in a daze. Space changed and time shifted. He sighed softly. He had finally returned. This was the world he belonged to. A year had passed, and this would be his main battlefield. He only had one goal, and that was to kill his enemies. He was now a quasi-divine king. He was no longer the same as he was a year ago. He could only watch as Sky Blade, Thunder God, and Red Spider Lilies self-destructed, and the people around him died one after another. Now, he was thinking about killing God. What's the situation like now? Chu Feng asked the demon ancestral cauldron. He wanted to know the current situation. Before he left, he already knew that the passageway to the Yang realm could be maintained for more than a year, so he disappeared for a year and headed to the foreign realm to increase his strength. He was prepared to rush back before the people of the Yang realm completely left and settle some accounts with some people. The situation is a bit complicated. After a year, the ancestral demon cauldron did not change at all. It had been guarding this place all along and was on guard. Finally, it successfully brought Chu Feng back. No matter how strong you were, without the support of the people of this world, even a god as strong as you would not be able to cross over. Boom! The soul bell vibrated. Clearly, that was the disturbance caused by the stone fox and the little vermilion bird. The lame celestial venerable's intuition was very powerful. He had a premonition that he had successfully crossed the boundary and arrived in the netherworld. Chu Feng pulled out the magnetic pith and released both of them from the soul bell. At the same time, his soul light also returned to his corporeal body, which made him feel much more comfortable. So cold! The little vermilion bird shivered as soon as she came out. For safety's sake, Chu Feng asked her to seal herself to the state of a secondary saint for fear that something might happen. She had always lived in the foreign realm, and this was the first time she came to such an ice-cold cosmos, so she wasn't used to it. The lame celestial venerable was much calmer. He had walked an incomparably long path. Even in the Yang realm, he had been to some places of extreme een that were even colder than the netherworld. Right now, it was experiencing, comprehending, understanding the true situation of this cosmos. Its expression was a bit complicated. It actually really broke free from the other side, successfully crossing over. This meant that it had broken free from its master's shackles for the first time. Its life had taken a turn for the better, and it would break its destiny. Is this the netherworld? The little vermilion bird blinked her big eyes. She was very curious about everything. The ancestral demon cauldron still wanted to speak to Chu Feng, but when it suddenly saw two more living beings, it immediately shut its mouth and did not say anything. "It's not the underworld," the lame heavenly race expert suddenly said. What was going on? Chu Feng had wanted to explain the situation to the little vermilion bird and the stone fox, as well as some things that they needed to pay attention to. He hadn't expected to hear this. If this isn't the netherworld, then where is it? Could it be that there was a problem with his return? Had he been schemed against? In an instant, Chu Feng's heart trembled. He was extremely vigilant. He opened his eyes of fire and gold and looked at the demonic cauldron. But that's right. He suspiciously looked at the stone fox. The great Tao is damaged, and the order is severely flawed. Most importantly, this world is too small. Rather than calling it a universe, it would be better to call it a narrow and cold space. The lame Empyrean said these words calmly. This made Chu Feng stunned. At the same time, the ancestral demon cauldron was stunned. Isn't this the underworld? How could it be wrong? The ancestral demon cauldron was puzzled. Chu Feng pondered. This wasn't the first time he had heard of this. At the same time, he thought of the extreme martial Empyrean. Last time, he also mentioned that this was a narrow space and a mass grave. He questioned whether this was the underworld. From the looks of it now, could there really be some problems? I recalled some old matters. The stone fox was unwilling to recall his master, but he had no choice but to mention it. In the past, when his master discussed the Tao with another almighty being, he had mentioned that if there was Yang, there would be Yin. They were natural opposites. The Yang realm was so resplendent, so the underworld wouldn't be weak either. The stone fox said, "My master was deducing the underworld at that time." When Chu Feng heard this, his brows deeply furrowed. "I have a feeling that the underworld my master spoke of isn't this place." The lame Empyrean was very serious. Of course, his master had never left the Yang realm and had never personally visited this cosmos. This time, after understanding the details from the people of the Yang realm, he should have a deeper deduction. However, the stone fox was an abandoned disciple, so he didn't have the qualifications to know the follow-up. This underworld isn't the true underworld? The demon ancestral cauldron was dumbstruck. If it wasn't the true underworld, then where was it? The stone fox said, "In theory, there should be a great underworld. It is cold and grand, and its history is extremely long. It is incomparably ancient and stands in opposition to the Yang realm. This made Chu Feng's body go slightly cold. This was truly shocking. The stone fox was very serious as he said, however, regarding the great underworld in theory, there really isn't any conclusive evidence. It is only the deduction of an almighty being. That kind of theory was difficult to find evidence to prove. This was because no one could reach the great underworld. At the very least, beings at the level of the Empyrean couldn't do it, and they had never truly understood it. The underworld they knew was only this mass grave. Chu Feng was lost in thought for a long time. That so-called deduction was very reasonable. If there was Yin, then there would be Yang. Since there was a vast and resplendent Yang realm, in theory, there should also be a terrifyingly prosperous great underworld. In the past, he always felt that it was unfair and inappropriate. Why was their universe far inferior to the Yang realm? The so-called Yin and Yang were too unbalanced. Now, he came to some realization. If that theory wasn't wrong, then the great underworld had never appeared before. Thinking about it carefully, the evolvers here were truly somewhat pitiful in this broken world and flawed space. They bore the name of the underworld and were suppressed by the people of the Yang realm. Great underworld! Chu Feng's mind wandered and he pondered for a long time. Soon after, he came back to his senses. He had just returned today, so why was he in a daze? This wasn't the main point now. He would discuss it with the lame Empyrean when he had the time. He had been in the foreign realm for 100 years, and this world had passed for a year. Had there been any unforeseen events? He hurriedly asked the demon ancestral cauldron if the people of the Yang realm had descended into this universe again. Yes, some of them have come again, the demon ancestral cauldron informed him truthfully. I'm going to kill them all. After Chu Feng heard this, divine light shot out from his eyes, but he controlled himself very well and didn't erupt with divine-level energy waves. He was worried. He was most worried about the little Taoist at the moment. His parents were no longer around, Qin Luoyin had passed away, and his relatives and friends were all dead. Only a child was left. He should be fine, said the demon ancestral cauldron. Whoosh. Even so, Chu Feng still set off at the first instance and rushed into the starry sky with them. He had left for more than a year, but in reality, he had really experienced 100 years. He couldn't sit still when he thought of his only child. In the universe, flowing light faded away. Even if Chu Feng suppressed himself to the Illuminator realm, he was still terrifying once he frantically hurried along. The surrounding sea of stars flowed in reverse. As expected, it's a narrow and cold space. How can an Illuminator travel like this in the true great underworld cosmos? Said the lame Empyrean. If he hadn't heard the conversation between his master and another powerhouse, he would only feel that the so-called underworld was too unbearable. And now, he had more and more reason to believe that there was still a true great underworld. Chu Feng couldn't care less about these things. Right now, he just wanted to see his child as soon as possible. After 100 years of separation, he had brought back a few talisman papers at once this time. If the little Taoist found out, he didn't know what kind of expression he would have. Chapter 970. Along the way, Chu Feng saw some special evolvers emitting yang qi. They were different from the people of this universe and clearly came from the Yang realm. However, he didn't attack them and didn't alert them to avoid any accident. The Damring Pure Land's foundation had been destroyed and the original Taoist land had long since become a wasteland. Hundreds of thousands of disciples were killed and blood flowed like a river. Chu Feng sighed as he passed by this planet. He had come here several times in the past, borrowed a way to enter the foreign land, killed the little saints of the chaotic universe, and married Qin Luoyin. Everything seemed to have happened yesterday, but when he stopped here and looked back, nothing was left. The woman who was once regarded as a goddess by the younger generation was gone and could no longer be seen. More than a year had passed, but the corpses in the damning Pure Land were still there. The mountains and rivers were still stained with the blood of the saints and were still scarlet with a luster. It was very glaring and caused boundless killing intent to soar in his heart. There was a fire in Chu Feng's heart. He had endured for 100 years just to return today and go on a killing spree. For 100 years, he had been cultivating to temporarily forget everything. That day, all the scenes of his loved ones dying, but how could he really forget? Swoosh! He disappeared from here and sank into the depths of the starry sea. In the end, Chu Feng arrived and descended on a desolate starfield. He appeared outside an unremarkable small planet. This was the damning Pure Land's path of retreat back then. Some seeds and inheritances were hidden here. There were flying swords colliding and secret treasures clashing on this planet. After entering the atmosphere, one could clearly feel that the battle was very intense. The mountains and rivers were all rumbling and glowing. Chu Feng's eyes immediately widened in anger. He disappeared from his original position with a chi and dove to the surface. He was really a little afraid of seeing a heart-wrenching scene. He was afraid of seeing the little Taoist bleeding and being captured or even killed by the people of the Yang realm. Chu Feng fell like lightning and the void became glaring. It was as if a snow-white blade covered the sky and earth as he came. It really frightened the people on this planet. But very soon, he retracted his aura and discovered that it was a false alarm. The evolvers from damning Pure Land were exchanging pointers, and it was a very real showdown. Both the disciples and the elders were completely engrossed in it. Great Dream Planet was destroyed, and all the survivors of the sect were in great pain. Their hearts were still bleeding for more than a year. Their senior brothers and sisters had died too tragically, and they could never see them again. There was also their master, grandmaster, and the others. When they were fighting for an opportunity for the few of them to escape, they were blown up by the enemy with a single punch. After casting a Dharma idol divine ability, they were stomped into a bloody pulp. That kind of suffering, that kind of tragedy was something that they would never be able to forget for the rest of their lives. Therefore, all of them had been cultivating bitterly for the past year or so. They wanted to restore damning Pure Land's glory and make it strong and prosperous once more. They even hoped to take revenge one day. Chu Feng saw the little Taoist at a glance. Even though he was only a little over a year old, he ran like the wind and leaped from one cliff to another in the mountains. He was too nimble. He had fallen into the fetal confusion realm and hadn't recovered yet. He had forgotten all the secret arts he knew, but this kind of physical strength wasn't something an ordinary person could compare to. Furthermore, the sound of thunder appeared as he ran and his feet glowed. He had already begun to try cultivating at a young age. Chu Feng nodded. Before he left, he had personally written down a method completely according to the handbook Shi who had given him. It explained how to nurture the strongest genius. The little Taoist was training according to some of the ancient methods written on it. It was just that some heavenly materials and earthly treasures definitely couldn't be found, and they could only grow in the Yang realm. It was a little regretful. Chu Feng? Someone cried out in surprise. The only saint of damning Pure Land, the old man who had been saved by Chu Feng back then, was the first to rush over. He was very excited after seeing him. The other disciples had also arrived, and there were also some elders. All of them were happy and sad because they thought of Qin Luoyin when they saw him. Their heaven-bestowing saintess would never return and had perished a year ago. The little Taoist's physique was very good. He jumped between the cliffs like a strong and powerful primordial beast cub. His spiritual senses were sharp, and he suddenly turned his head around. He was immediately startled when he saw Chu Feng in a glance. After that, he pounced down from the cliff like a bird of prey spreading its wings. He grabbed a mountain vine in midair and swung over, landing close to Chu Feng with a whoosh. Without a doubt, the current him had forgotten the past. He wasn't that venomous-mouthed Taoist, but a child with a pure heart. There wasn't a single blemish in his large eyes, and they were as clear as crystals. He was extremely close to Chu Feng because they were father and son connected by blood. He had an indescribable reaction. The little Taoist pounced forward and hugged one of Chu Feng's arms. It was just one sentence, but it almost made Chu Feng cry. "I miss my mother." He was very pure now and didn't have any memories of his past life. However, he was precocious and remembered the scene of life and death parting a year ago. He already knew that Qin Luoyin had died, and what happened afterwards couldn't be hidden from him at all. Chu Feng felt suffocated in his chest, as if someone had stabbed him with a knife. He recalled the scene from a year ago when Qin Luoyin was covered in blood and corroded by a golden substance. That absolutely beautiful face was very pale and devoid of any color. She spoke weakly and powerlessly, asking him to take good care of the little Taoist. "One day we'll meet again." Chu Feng crouched down and stroked his head. "But she's no longer here. She's completely gone from this world." The little Taoist shed tears because he wasn't willing to say the word dead. He raised his head helplessly and looked at Chu Feng. His limpid eyes were filled with tears as he asked Chu Feng, "How can I see her?" The little Taoist, who had lost his memories and returned to the nature and heart of a child, now looked very pitiful. He lowered his head and looked at his own little feet in sorrow as he silently shed tears. Chu Feng said softly, "As long as you're strong enough, you can go to the Yang realm and you'll be able to see her. That's because her soul light hasn't been extinguished and she was reborn in the great Yang realm." In the past, he rarely spoke to the little Taoist like this. He would usually pick him up and beat him up. Now, he felt a little sour in his heart when he saw that the little Taoist had returned to his nature as a child and had such a melancholy expression on his little face. "Really?" The little Taoist raised his head. His big tearful eyes were very bright and revealed a hopeful expression. His entire being seemed to have gained an additional sense of vitality. That was because there was hope in his heart. He wasn't as helpless as he was in the past, always missing his mother but having nowhere to find her. A group of people from Damning Pure Land stood in the surroundings. They were all very astonished. Could Qin Luoyin still be resurrected? That old saint sighed softly. So what if she reincarnated into the Yang realm? She should be another person. Her appearance and even her race might undergo changes. It was full of uncertainty. Isn't this the little Taoist from over 200 years ago? He hasn't changed much. The little vermilion bird walked forward and looked at the little Taoist. She felt that he was especially adorable and much better than his loathsome appearance back then. Of course, she was still staying in the vermilion bird's nest at that time. She herself wasn't that old, but she and her mother had paid special attention to those evolvers from the outer realms who were wreaking havoc on the vicious beast plateau. "Hello, big sister." The little Taoist greeted her with tears in his eyes. He was very polite. He was like a different person from over 200 years ago in the foreign realm. After seeing the little Taoist, Chu Feng was completely at ease. Only then did he have the opportunity to ask about the demon ancestors' cauldron's recent situation. He also understood from the people of Damning Pure Land what had happened during this 1 year. There were indeed people from the Yang realm who came over during this year, but they were very low-key this time. They didn't act tyrannically like last time and were quietly searching for something. Later on, news spread that the great martial heavenly lord's Taoist body had fallen here. It caused a huge commotion and shocked all the sects in the Yin realm. Some people deduced that the great martial heavenly lord's Taoist body might still be alive and had awakened before. That was the fundamental reason why the great martial Taoist body had fallen. This naturally frightened these people who came from the Yin realm, and they immediately stopped being high-profile. However, after a year of exploration, the troops of a few sects had somewhat recovered their original nature. They still looked at the living beings in this universe with a condescending attitude and would occasionally appear very tyrannical. But overall, no one dared to massacre a race or shatter a few vital planets again. Other than that, there was another major event that also had an incomparably far-reaching impact. All the sects in the Yang realm were looking for seed-level disciples from the Yin realm. "What's going on specifically?" asked Chu Feng with a frown. "They're looking for gifted evolvers to bring to the Yang realm," the old saint of Damring Pure Land replied. This matter shook all the clans in the Yin realm cosmos. For a moment, many rogue cultivators and some talented and beautiful people signed up. For some unknown reason, the people from the Yang realm had indeed taken away many people. Later on, a major event occurred. Some powerful clans that could be ranked at the forefront in the Yang realm, such as the Tao race, the Buddhist race, and the quasi-immortal race, also had envoys rush over and grace this cosmos. This was subversive. After some envoys appeared, it was confirmed that more than half of the top 10 inheritances in the Yin realm were related to the Yang realm. "What happened after that?" asked Chu Feng. "The Tao race, quasi-immortal race, and the Buddhist race of the Yin realm all had special restrictions placed on them. As a result, the Yang realm breathing technique they mastered couldn't be passed on to others. Otherwise, they would directly turn into ashes." Chu Feng listened and was silent for a while. He naturally knew that some inheritances in this cosmos came from the Yang realm, but he still sighed after hearing this matter. The top-ranked orthodoxies in the Yang realm were indeed very terrifying and powerful. In addition, the envoys from the Yang realm also gave these clans a chance. Those who passed the test could go to the Yang realm and even bring their entire clans over. The old saint of Damning Pure Land informed him that many geniuses in this cosmos had disappeared and were suspected to have been taken away by the people from the Yang realm. In addition, there were entire clans that had left to carry out migration. How could it be so powerful and widespread? Chu Feng was astonished. At this moment, he somewhat understood why the disciples of Taiwu, Hunyi, Yuanshi, and Luan Yu didn't touch the Tao race and quasi-immortal race last time. That was because these clans had a foundation in the Yang realm and had great origins. In reality, this was the truth. When the evolvers from the Yang realm descended a year ago, the breathing techniques they collected came from the clans that had been exterminated in the Yang realm but once had great origins. For example, Damring breathing technique was once ranked in the top 10 in the Yang realm in ancient times, but it was eliminated in a certain era and the entire sect was annihilated. There was also the undead silkworm race. They also declined from their glory in the Yang realm, but their undead breathing technique was still coveted and envied. As a result, after the people of the Yang realm came over, they directly attacked the clans that had mastered these breathing techniques without any scruples. Accepting people from the Yang realm as disciples. Weren't they very disdainful? Why are they paying attention now? Chu Feng was puzzled. At this time, the lame celestial venerable secretly transmitted his voice to inform him of some situations. The Yang realm had always been conducting all kinds of experiments on the strongest geniuses. The various clans had always been thinking of ways to cultivate even more heaven-defying descendants, wanting each generation to be stronger than the previous one. Among them, there was a theory that the pure Yang didn't necessarily represent the strongest. Perhaps they could consider sending the so-called geniuses from the Yang realm into the netherworld realm. Then, they could refine them for a period of time before bringing them back. There might be unexpected results. Among them, there was a theory that the pure Yang didn't necessarily represent the strongest. Perhaps they could consider putting the so-called geniuses from the Yang realm into the Yang realm and refining them for a period of time before bringing them back. There might be unexpected results. The old saint of Damring Pure Land sighed. The geniuses of the Yang realm were most likely going to be cut off. Many famous geniuses had already disappeared for a long time and were suspected to have left or even been abducted. The lame celestial venerable secretly said, "I'm guessing it's because Tai Wu died here. They suspect that the great cosmos realm evolver is protecting this universe. Perhaps they guessed that the great cosmos realm existence isn't from the Yang realm but was born here. Naturally, the Yang realm began to attach great importance to this place. In addition, my master's great Yin realm deduction and a certain Almighty's plan to nurture the strongest disciple might be valued by some people. They want a large number of Yin realm species to experiment on. Will they end up miserable after becoming experimental subjects?" Chu Feng heard this and frowned deeply. The Yang realm's movements weren't small. Shi Hu said, "Not for the time being. When the time comes, they will become disciples of various sections. If their performance is good enough, there will be many opportunities. Of course, if their performance is bad, then it's another matter." Chu Feng understood in detail, and asked the old saint of damning Pure Land. That was because although he knew a little about the demon ancestors' cauldron, it had been hidden in Mount Eternal for a long time, waiting to receive Chu Feng's return. He didn't have a very detailed understanding of the outside world. Recently, the intensity of selecting Yin realm species has been increasing. There are rumors that Yin realm species that perform well enough can bring their entire race into the Yang realm. I think some of the orthodoxies on some vital planets may become empty. When the old saint of damning Pure Land went out, he understood that those chosen geniuses would undergo a test in the chaotic universe. If they passed the test, they would be recognized as Yin realm species. Those who disappeared went to the chaotic universe? Chu Feng revealed an astonished expression. Yes. The old saint nodded. After understanding this, Chu Feng revealed a cold expression. After thoroughly understanding everything, he was ready to attack. He wanted to kill his way from the Yin realm to the chaotic universe and become a dark hunter. He would go on a killing spree and pay blood debts with blood. Of course, he had to plan and unleash his strongest destructive power. He also had to ensure that nothing unexpected would happen to him. "I have a debt to collect," he said calmly. In the past, he struggled bitterly and watched helplessly as the people around him died. He was in incomparable pain and was powerless to defy the heavens. Chapter 971. Chu Feng couldn't restrain himself any longer. He wanted to go on a killing spree and hunt down the gods from the Yang realm. Amidst the mountains, there were small bridges and flowing streams, pavilions, terraces and pavilions and misty mist, causing it to seem like a magnificent paradise. Chu Feng sat under an ancient tree that had been struck by lightning. Even though there were black scorch marks on it, there were still branches sprouting. The entire tree was verdant, and there were even some glistening yellow fruits that flowed with brilliant colors. He was inspecting the little Taoist's physical condition. The quality of little Taoist's corporeal body was superb, and his soul light was even more astonishingly powerful. Once he broke through the congenital confusion, he would inevitably achieve a super-evolution. Chu Feng sighed lightly. He had brought back a few pieces of talisman paper, but he had no way to give them to him now. The little Taoist had yet to awaken and was just a child. He basically didn't know the importance of talisman paper. But he had to go on his way. He was going to slay a god, so he needed to make arrangements for the matters after he left as soon as possible. He hoped that the little Taoist could recover within a short period of time. Even though his son back then wasn't as well behaved as he was now, and could even be said to be extremely loathsome, with a particularly foul mouth that made him want to pick him up and beat him up every time, that kind of little Taoist could protect himself after he left, which made him feel at ease. "The people of the Yang realm have been searching for this child for the past year," informed the old saint of damning Pure Land with a worried expression. The people of the Yang realm had already learned everything about Chu Feng from some informants and guide. They knew that Chu Feng had another child, and that the child was his only bloodline. But what they couldn't understand was that they actually missed this last time and didn't manage to find this place. For the past year, the people of the Yang realm had naturally been looking for Chu Feng. After they found out that he wasn't dead, they wished they could dig 3 feet into the ground. At the same time, they were also looking for the little Taoist because they wanted to use his only son to threaten him. The people of the Yang realm understood that after killing Chu Feng's parents, Tao companions, and all his relatives and friends, he must have already gone mad. Apart from that child, there was nothing else that could threaten him. But they were disappointed. No matter how they searched, they had no way of finding the little Taoist. Even the weasel couldn't deduce it seriously. It was a mess. She is still in the womb, and the power of reincarnation has yet to completely disperse. Naturally, she is unable to deduce anything. Sure, who was rather shocked. He never expected to see a reincarnator with his own eyes. He knew about this kind of thing, but he had never seen it before. Yet, there was an example right in front of him. This little fellow isn't simple. Sure, who said as he stared at the little Taoist seriously. Yes, my son said that he was an Empyrean in his past life, Chu Feng said. The lame celestial venerable, #Yen%. Why did it feel that Chu Feng was scolding it? It squinted at him, its stone eyes emitting a murderous aura. Brat, you're provoking me. Its eyes became more and more green. People from the outer realms have come again and entered this part of the starry sky. This is the 11th time that people from the Yang realm have passed by this area in the past half a year. Truly makes us worried. The old saint informed. They had a stronghold in outer space, so they could give an early warning. When Chu Feng heard this, he was instantly like an enraged lion, and he fiercely raised his head with a murderous look. He still hadn't gone to the Yang realm to settle the score, yet the other party had always been thinking about his son. They really deserved to be killed. In the next moment, he vanished from this place and reappeared in the depths of the starry sky. He saw a group of people riding on mounts and wearing shining armor. All of them were surging with Yang energy, like heavenly soldiers and generals. Among them, apart from a few guides who belonged to the Yang realm, the other dozen or so people were saints from the Yang realm. At this moment, a young man appeared silently in front of them. He was tall, his black hair was sparkling and translucent, and his eyes were deep as he looked at them coldly. Chu Feng! He's Chu Feng! The guide cried out, revealing an obvious look of fear. As for those people from the Yang realm, they were also surprised. They were looking for Chu Feng's son, but they didn't expect to actually find him after a year. For a moment, they were surprised and delighted because this meant that they had completed their mission. Of course, they also had a strong sense of unease. A year ago, even the Tao body of the great martial heavenly venerable had died in the abyss, so how did this native survive? Chu Feng, we've come with sincerity. We've received a divine decree to invite you to the Yang realm. There's a divine king who wants to accept you as his disciple, said one of the people riding a golden bat. He tried his best to reveal a friendly smile. This naturally wasn't sincere. It was just to be safe. Bang! Chu Feng took a step forward and appeared among them. He grabbed this person by the neck and lifted him up completely. He looked down at him and said, "You killed my parents, wife, and son, yet you still want to accept me as a disciple. You scum. It's a misunderstanding. We're not from the great martial school, but from other orthodoxies," this person shouted with difficulty. The others nearby had long since brandished their weapons and were about to fight Chu Feng with their lives. However, they all disintegrated amidst puffing sounds and turned into a bloody mist before being burned to ashes. Chu Feng had already searched their souls and understood that these people were from the great martial school, as well as the descendants of Hun Yi, Yuanshi, and Luan Yu. At the same time, he also clarified the identity of the guide. In the end, everyone in this area was completely annihilated with a bang, and their soul light turned into cosmic dust. These were all small fries that couldn't amount to anything, but Chu Feng had already understood enough things from their soul light. Chu Feng disappeared and returned to that small planet. He bid farewell to the little Taoist and left this place. He was prepared to finish some matters of the mortal world before killing the experts of the Yang realm. He also hoped to stimulate the little Taoist's innate wisdom during this process and break the mystery of the fetus. The Yin realm is really cold. On the way, the scarlet wings of the little vermilion bird shone. She had already sealed a part of her cultivation, but she could break the restriction at any time. Was it cold? Chu Feng didn't feel anything. It wasn't because his strength had increased, but because he had long since adapted to this part of the universe. He didn't say anything along the way. He brought the little Taoist across the brilliant sea of stars and experienced the beauty of the Yin realm's tranquil universe. The closer he was to leaving, the more reluctant he was. On the way, he asked the old Taoist how to awaken a person with innate wisdom and break the mystery of the fetus. Tell him more about the past or experience some similar scenes. This was the Shi-Hu's suggestion. A stretch of darkness stretched across the front and devoured all the light. This was a great abyss, and it made even the lame celestial venerable's hair stand on end. Even though he was petrified, he still felt a layer of goosebump. It was too horrifying. Leave quickly. He really couldn't stand it any longer. Chu Feng silently held a memorial here. His old friends had all died here. He gazed into the abyss and longed to see that devastatingly beautiful woman in white again. However, he waited here for a long time without discovering anything. Could it be that Yao Yao could no longer appear in the world? He didn't know, and he didn't dare to think too deeply. He was afraid of knowing the final outcome and the darkness and despair in his heart. Chu Feng took out a snow-white talisman and then loosened it gently. Just like that, it fell into the great abyss and floated downwards before quickly disappearing. "Brat, are you crazy?" Even the Shi-Hu cried out in alarm. This item was priceless. Even those ancient orthodoxies and supreme sects in the Yang realm wanted to obtain it. For this kind of talisman, they would fight to the death and cause rivers of blood to flow. In the end, Chu Feng just casually threw one away. "Yao Yao." He called out softly and didn't say anything else. He stood here for a long time before finally leaving reluctantly. He still had too many things to do and couldn't accompany her here. Until he was far away, the lame celestial venerable was still hating and hating. He said that Chu Feng was too wasteful and that he was squandering things without limit. At the same time, he suspected that the Great Abyss was the #1 forbidden land in this cosmos. By right, it should produce talismans, but something wasn't quite right at present. Next, Chu Feng walked through the starry skies and went to one source of life after another. However, he gradually frowned. He wanted to secretly visit Lu Tong, the clairvoyant Du Huijin, Yi Qingru, and the others. Back then, these people had also left Earth and were scattered to various places. However, he couldn't find them even now. Many sects on these planets were already in midair. They had signed up to participate in the Yang realm selection trial and had been taken away. Have they been coerced into following me into the chaotic universe? Chu Feng frowned. Next, Chu Feng went to the Tao race, the Buddhist race, and the quasi-immortal race to understand the situation. His expression was grave, because most of the powerful evolved races were no longer in midair. He wanted to see some of his old friends, such as the silver-haired Lolita Ing Xiao Xiao and Ing Wudi. They had been taken away by the emissaries from the Yang realm and were currently in the chaotic universe. It was more or less like this when he walked through the starry skies. Yuan Shiqing, Yuan Yuan, and many others had left. He couldn't even see some of his old friends even if he wanted to. Even Yuan Mo and Zi Luan weren't around and couldn't be found. The whole world was quiet and had lost the clamor of the past. It actually seemed so cold and desolate. Chu Feng increasingly felt that he really needed to leave. The next moment, he disappeared and appeared in a remote starry domain. He descended on a small planet that no one had visited before and dug into the depths of the earth. Where is she? Chu Feng was dumbfounded. Yao Yao's sister was gone, and the ancient coffin with the mother gold was gone. It had completely disappeared. Senior! Chu Feng's body went cold as he shouted here. Back then, he was afraid that something would happen if he hid the old man on Earth, so he brought him out. In the end, something had happened. Could he not escape this calamity? But looking at the situation, there were no traces of a battle. This made him suspicious. Chu Feng opened his fiery eyes and searched the entire planet. Finally, he found something. He saw a few words on an unremarkable bluestone in the depths of the earth. He knew what it was after sure who identified it. Yao Yao, my Yao Yao, Grandpa will avenge you. After reading these words, Chu Feng was greatly shaken. How much of the old man's consciousness had he temporarily recovered? But it was still easy for something big to happen. It was very likely that he would completely lose his will. Looking at these words, he could understand the old man's mood. He felt sad and could feel the old man's helplessness, sadness, and desolation, as well as his final determination to meet death. Don't let anything happen. Chu Feng couldn't stay any longer. It's useless even if you're anxious. This is a message left a long time ago. The lame celestial venerable spoke. Then, his expression became incomparably grave as he said, "At the same time, you don't need to worry too much. The entity that can plant the mother gold in the body of a heaven-bestowed genius from the Yang realm must be a powerhouse of the Yang realm. This is his experimental body. No one would dare to destroy it." Chu Feng returned to Earth and walked through old places with the little Taoist, the lame celestial venerable, and the little vermilion bird. Chapter 972. Peacock King, 9 Lives Cat. Chu Feng was startled. He had actually seen these two people from afar as he walked through the mountains and rivers. It wasn't easy for them to live until now. Back then, they were considered well known among the early evolvers of Earth. They had waged war against the human race and even made Chu Feng his enemy. The 9 Lives Cat had even been killed by him. In the end, cats had 9 lives and had actually come back to life. Later on, they were very wise and didn't make enemies with Chu Feng again. They also became incomparably low-key and left with people from the outer realms for a period of time. Chu Feng was now so powerful that he could see through their thoughts with a sweep of his soul light. He discovered that these two were in dire straits in the outer realms and had returned with great difficulty. At this level, Chu Feng didn't want to bicker with them. So much so that the two didn't even notice that he had probed into their inner world. Many people were no longer around and it wasn't easy to see an acquaintance. Chu Feng let them go and didn't kill them. Standing on Mount Zhijin outside of Jiangning, Chu Feng gazed into the distance. The so-called revered 8 trigrams furnace here could already be seen at a glance. It was a man-made arrangement. If it were naturally formed, it would be boundlessly terrifying. Gods would slay gods and Buddhas would slay Buddhas. The flames of the 8 trigrams would burn the ancient heavens. Chu Feng was lost in thought as he gazed into the distant horizon. He thought of many people. The headquarters of some corporations in the nearby Jiangning city were still there. Bodhi Jin was among them. He thought of Jiang Luotian, the national goddess who had many interactions with him. He also thought of her bosom friend Xia Qianyu, who had gone on a blind date with her. It was said that Jiang Luotian had been taken away by a Buddhist race master. Her bosom friend had also disappeared and hadn't appeared for a long time. There was also the White Tiger and his sister Lu Shiyun. It was said that they had also entered the outer realms, but there had been no follow-up news. Suqing? Chu Feng stood on Mount Zhijin and unexpectedly saw a white-robed man. Back then, the young Xingyi Fist Grandmaster had colluded with the marine race. In the end, he was ambushed by Chu Feng and robbed of the Xingyi Fist manual. Lost in thought, Chu Feng disappeared from this place. He didn't go to see her. He wanted to take a stroll around the world and put an end to all matters of the mortal world. He wanted to bid his final farewell. Chu Feng entered Jiangning City and was lost in thought. He saw a huge poster. It was director Zhou Etienne's latest masterpiece, The Return of Chu God King. This made his thoughts fluctuate. He thought of the old days in Taihang Mountains. At that time, this lousy director was not afraid of death and followed him to shoot crazily. In the end, the response of the real drama was unexpectedly fierce. Chu Feng stared at the poster for a long time. Under such circumstances, Zhou Etienne still dared to photograph the return of divine King Chu. This really required a lot of courage. Isn't that you? The little vermilion bird tilted her head and stared at the poster with great interest. Chu Feng smiled bitterly. Things remained the same, but people had changed. There weren't many acquaintances he could see after returning to Earth. Perhaps there were a few in the West. He raised his head abruptly as he sensed something. Then, he disappeared from the ground with a few people and rushed into space. He saw a god standing in front of the moon. This god had suppressed his realm and didn't dare to release god-level fluctuations. Chu Feng? The expert from the Yang realm cried out in surprise. Let the god-slaying begin, Chu Feng said to himself. Then, his eyes widened in anger. He couldn't help but erupt. I was just about to capture you. Watch my sky-flipping seal. This person's divine senses were sharp. He felt that something was wrong and was shocked. He felt that Chu Feng seemed to be very terrifying. With a raise of his hand, he struck out a dazzling golden seal. Sky-flipping seal, I have one too, Chu Feng shouted angrily. He grabbed the stone fox and smashed it over. The lame celestial venerable cursed. Son of AB*****. He wanted to curse. This little bastard used him as a stone hammer to smash the divine nucleus in the foreign land. Now, he was doing it again. Was he getting more and more comfortable with it? Crack! The stone fox smashed the large seal that was flipped over and smashed it into the body of the god, breaking his bones and tendons. Shock! This god simply didn't dare believe it. Immediately afterwards, he was even more horrified. Chu Feng rushed over with a single step, attacking him fiercely and suppressing him. He used a spear to pierce through him, and then flung him up. So, immediately afterwards they disappeared, tearing apart the cosmos' starry skies. When they appeared again, they were already outside the great abyss. This deity roared angrily. He could naturally sense that Chu Feng's backing was many times deeper than his. There seemed to be terrifying divine king-level fluctuations within his body. He went all out, erupting with power, wishing to fight to the death. Chu Feng shook his hand, throwing him into the great abyss. Ah! There was only a miserable scream. Regardless of whether he erupted with power or not, he would still die if he sank into the great abyss. It was because he didn't have the stone case's protection. As expected, he turned into ashes. The battle ended simply and quickly. However, Chu Feng was also covered in cold sweat. He was a bit worried just now, scared that he would be devoured by the great abyss. However, now, it seemed like as long as he suppressed it well enough, there wouldn't be any problems. After all, this time wasn't like the last time when there was a celestial who caused trouble and was excessively arrogant. He returned to Earth's outer space. The stone fox was cursing loudly, cursing Chu Feng for being too shameless and wanting to fight him to the death. Senior, stop. Quickly, look. Is my child going to break free from the confusion in his womb? Chu Feng was very astonished. The little Taoist was lost in thought after seeing him fight. His eyes were flickering indeterminately. Oh, that's what he meant. The stone fox nodded. However, no matter how Chu Feng called out and guided him, the little Taoist still didn't completely awaken his previous life's memories. Son, quickly look. This is our family heirloom. Chu Feng suddenly shouted. Where is it? It's mine. Father, make a will and pass it to me. The little Taoist immediately recovered. His entire body was still a bit dizzy as he shouted in such a hurry. I'll beat you to death. Chu Feng dragged him over and started to beat his buttocks. Ouch, it hurts. Dear father, stop right now. I miss my mother. I want to avenge my mother. How can you bear to lay your hands on me? As expected, Chu Feng lost his temper after the little Taoist shouted like this. His expression turned gloomy as he stopped beating. Father, you're lying to me again. Where's the family heirloom? Look at you. You stole my black talisman paper and still haven't returned it. You even bullied and humiliated me in all kinds of ways. The little Taoist was indignant. I'll compensate you this time. I'll give you the talisman paper. Chu Feng said. The little Taoist would definitely be happy and excited since he had brought back so many talisman papers. Really? The little Taoist immediately jumped up and wiped his tears. You'll really return it to me? He couldn't forget about it and had yearned for it for a long time. He even suspected that he wouldn't be able to see it in this lifetime. He was worried that this unreliable father of his would lose it and not give it to him anymore. Chu Feng thought about it and took out the black talisman paper first. Last time he went to purgatory to send everyone to the afterlife, he used up 99% of it. There was still a little left that flickered with black light. Ah! The little Taoist screamed miserably after seeing it. Chapter 973. The little Taoist's originally exquisite little face had completely collapsed. It could be said that his face was the color of dirt. That little appearance really reflected that there was nothing left to live for. He howled, wanting to fight Chu Feng to the death. Then, as if he was having a heart attack, he clutched his chest and cried out in pain. His steps were unsteady, his body staggered, and he almost fell to the ground. He was like a doddering old man, unable to stand steadily. He was flustered and exasperated, wanting to fight to the death with Chu Feng. The little vermilion bird was dumbstruck. She felt a strange feeling as she looked at the father and son pair. The lame Empyrean was also quite speechless. This father and son pair were really strange. He had seen naughty children who deceived their parents, but he had never seen such a naughty father. Son, you must be strong. Chu Feng supported the little Taoist with a solemn look on his face as he encouraged him. When the little Taoist saw him like this, he looked at the broken corner of the talisman paper in his hand again. He really didn't want to live anymore and was itching to smash his head against the ground. However, in the end, he used all his strength to smash into Chu Feng. He was in complete despair. In the past, he still had hope for Chu Feng to return it to him. But what did he see now? There was only a small piece of the black talisman paper left. 99% of it had been used up. He felt as if he had been struck by lightning, and all his hopes turned to dust. Great Demon Chu, I want to have a decisive battle with you. You stole my talisman on the path of reincarnation, and now you're cutting off my path ahead. Boo-hoo! I'm too pitiful, I don't want to live anymore. His eyes were completely red as he wiped away his tears. He felt too wronged. If this wasn't his father in this world, he really would have killed him. Sigh. Chu Feng let out a sigh and stroked the little Taoist's head. In the end, the little Taoist wanted to bite him, so he treated him like a stone pillar again and rammed his head into it. At this moment, the little Taoist's eyes were filled with tears. He had thought very far ahead, and even planned to surpass the celestial venerable realm to command the yang realm. In the end it was too bumpy. Just as he lowered his head, his eyes red and swollen with tears, and his vision blurred, he suddenly saw his father waving a long object in front of him. "Go away, great devil! I admit defeat." He was furious and resentful. He was thinking about whether or not he should settle the score with his own father. It was too hateful, too shameful. He was so angry that he couldn't take it anymore. "What is this?" Suddenly, he stuttered. That was because even though her eyes were brimming with tears, she could still vaguely see something. Why did it feel like a bright red talisman? He immediately rubbed his eyes and squeezed out all the tears. He could clearly see that there was a ball of red light in front of him. The scarlet talisman paper was sparkling and sparkling, flowing with mysterious patterns. "It's really that kind of talisman?" The little Taoist let out a strange cry and snatched it away. He turned it over and over to take a look. His eyes were really emitting blue light. He immediately stopped crying, and saliva almost dripped out of his mouth. He caressed the talisman for a long time, as if he were touching a peerless treasure. Only in the end did he come to his senses. He grabbed the talisman with both hands and cautiously backed up, looking at Chu Feng. "Son, is it a present from Dad?" Chu Feng looked like a loving father, his face full of a kind smile. The little Taoist was startled. Did this biological father of his have a change of heart? Was he really giving him a talisman? Where did this talisman paper come from? It was too strange. However, after a short moment of absent-mindedness, the little Taoist's face darkened slightly again. That was because he gradually came to a realization. The more he pondered over it, the more he felt that something was amiss. This biological father of his was too unkind. He was clearly torturing him on purpose and watching him lose all hope in life. Too shameful. His little face wrinkled as he clenched his teeth. Was this still his biological father? He was actually so hateful and hateful. He wanted to beat someone up. Especially now that he saw Chu Feng's loving father temperament, he was so angry that he wanted to fight a decisive battle with Chu Feng. Chu Feng coughed dryly and stopped before going too far. Otherwise, the little Taoist would really become angry. The little Taoist was still in a bad mood. He had never seen a father who tricked his son like this. However, he quickly thought of some old matters. He felt that this biological father was most likely holding a grudge and educating him. When he was in the foreign realm, he tricked Chu Feng into shedding tears for the sake of the family heirloom. In the end, this was revenge for revenge. "You have to compensate me. Tell me, what exactly is our family heirloom?" The little Taoist was really unwilling. "Our family heirloom is in these 8 words. Remember it well." Chu Feng had a solemn expression on his face. The little Taoist was immediately solemn when he heard this. Did his father finally find his conscience and wanted to tell him the truth? Chu Feng was incomparably serious as he said, "Remember, supremely righteous, honest, and pure." The little Taoist was so angry that he wanted to beat someone up. He didn't want to talk to him anymore. Weren't these words the Luanhui King and Demon King Chu used to fish for fame and praise? "Come, let me introduce you. This is Heavenly Venerable Stone Fox, and this is Big Sister Zhu Yan." The little Taoist wouldn't believe that there was a Heavenly Venerable in front of him. Chu Feng brought them on the road again. They left Kunlun and crossed west. On the way, the little Taoist was stunned because he understood that this lame stone fox was really a Heavenly Venerable. Moreover, he was from the Yang realm. Suddenly, he had a new task. Chu Feng arranged for him to carry the stone fox on his back and ask for more advice. The lame Heavenly Venerable had a suspicious look on his face. He seriously suspected that this glib-tongued Taoist was really a Heavenly Venerable in his previous life. Ahem, Heavenly Venerable aptitude. The little Taoist looked shy. However, no matter how one looked at it, It was impossible for him to be shy with his thick skin. He was deliberately pretending to be young and cute. He wanted to fool the stone fox with the attitude of a child. The lame heavenly venerable revealed a strange expression. This little Taoist, who looked as if he had nothing to live for just a moment ago, had a good mentality or a thick skin. After crying, he adjusted himself and wanted to take out some scriptures and secret techniques from the stone fox. Especially when he learned that Chu Feng and the stone fox had joined hands and brought back 4 pieces of talisman paper, the little Taoist directly shouted that he would go to the forbidden area again and empty it. He would loot all the fortunes there and dig 3 feet into the ground until not even a blade of grass could grow. Chu Feng climbed Mount Olympus once again. Only 5 or 6 of the 12 plants from back then were left. Half of them had died, but the golden crow vine was still there. Lightning flickered, and he had become one of the few experts of the West. Zeus? He sighed softly and left. Afterwards, he went to the headquarters of the Holy See. The place that had been scorched and turned into ruins was still slightly dilapidated. There was an old man overseeing it. Chu Feng disappeared from this place and arrived at a volcanic crater in the west. He went deeper and deeper until he broke into an underground secret realm. It could be considered a folded space, and many plants grew in the churning magma. He saw a black egg with fine patterns and a sparkling luster. It floated in the depths of the magma and was a land of fortune in this secret realm. The undead Phoenix King. Chu Feng revealed a strange expression. He had found this old friend and had actually undergone a transformation. She was undergoing some kind of deep-level evolution. This could be considered nirvana. The undead Phoenix King used to be a queen with a cold temperament. She was an outstanding evolver in the West and had crossed paths with Chu Feng. They had met in Shuntian for a blind date and fought Schiller together on Mount Longhu. They hadn't seen each other since they parted. She had her own destiny. From Chu Feng's point of view, it was fine as long as she was alive. He didn't disturb her. He stood there for a moment, lost in thought as he thought about the past. Not long after, he disappeared. He found a few treasured trees from some folded spaces in the west and planted them nearby. The mutant trees and precious medicines that he had taken a fancy to and revived with the earth were naturally extraordinary. They would naturally be the best in the West if they were to mature. Only then did he leave completely. Chu Feng went to the holy city of the West, the holy land of the 3 religions, Jerusalem. He saw some evolvers and finally found a golden-haired little girl riding a whale king in the nearest sea region. Her eyes were pure as she flipped through ancient scriptures. Chu Feng watched calmly from far away and didn't disturb her. He had met this little girl when he first came to the West. She was rescuing a whale king. With his current cultivation and strength, he could naturally see through everything about her. Very soon, he captured bits and pieces of her soul light. The little girl was a descendant of the ancient earth. She was the descendant of the old, weak women and children who had luckily survived the pursuit of the heavenly knights. Yellow Cattle was the same. They were the descendants of those who had escaped. These survivors concealed their names in the starry skies. After the earth revived, this little girl was like Yellow Cattle. She immediately set foot on the return journey and returned to the ancestral land. Chu Feng didn't disturb her and left in silence. He returned to the east. When he revisited old places, he also saw some corpses and sighed inwardly. Some corporations had been destroyed, such as the Extraterrestrial Research Institute and the Pre-Chin Research Institute. Additionally, he saw a giant snake skeleton on Mount Taihang. That white snake had died. In the end, Chu Feng quietly watched a movie, The Return of Divine King Chu. Watching this movie, he recalled the past and was unexpectedly somewhat silent. Many things were gone forever and could never be repeated again. Many people could never be seen again. He didn't say goodbye to Zhou Etienne and only secretly prepared some mutant fruits and great medicines for him. They were all plucked in the depths of Kunlun's folded secret realm. Before long, before he left, Chu Feng discovered Vajra and Silver Wing of the 4 great mutants. He had once fought with the latter, but their enmity had already been resolved with a smile. He gave them some care in the dark, and did not come out to meet them face to face. He left. That was because if the people of the Yang realm found out that he had gotten close to those people, he might bring disaster upon them. Chapter 974. Chu Feng appeared in the dark and silent depths of the universe. No one knew that he had returned. The Hyene planet was a small but relatively famous life planet with a level 6 evolutionary civilization. In the distant past, this place had been incomparably prosperous. The sea-sky race had taken root here and had once stably ranked within the top 15 in the universe. However, they were now in dire straits. Chu Feng had arrived. Golden runes were reflected in his eyes as he stared at the boundless ocean in front of him with his fiery eyes. He had come to cause trouble for the sea-sky race. Before leaving, he wanted to get rid of the guides from the underworld. Back then, someone had taken the initiative to surrender to the Yang realm and had courteously offered information about him and his relative. He had already learned about this from the soul light of the Yang realm saints he had killed. He also knew that a few gods had appeared in the Yang realm, so he had to kill them all. Boom! The waves split apart and hit the sky tens of thousands of feet high. They scattered the clouds in the sky and revealed a bright red and sparkling coral palace at the bottom of the ocean. Who is it? Many people rushed out of the palace. Most of them were elders who were discussing how to develop after entering the Yang realm. That was because they were one of the first races to surrender to the Yang realm. Moreover, they were very efficient. Thus, they could enter the Yang realm even if they didn't have any outstanding species from the Yang realm. Huh! When they saw Chu Feng, they felt a chill from head to toe and their hearts were filled with fear. They were the clearest about what they had done. If they hadn't sent all kinds of information at the first instance and allowed the Yang realm to grasp everything about Chu Feng and make deductions, perhaps so many people wouldn't have died. Chu Feng's expression was ice-cold and filled with incomparable hatred. He had nothing to do with this race in the past and had never formed any enmity with them. However, at the crucial moment, they had become the guides and taken advantage of the situation, causing the deaths of the people around him. Chu Feng stomped down and the surface of the sea within a radius of several hundred miles sank. These people were crushed into powder and destroyed in both body and soul. Who dares to behave atrociously in my sea-sky race? There was another underground palace at the bottom of the ocean. An old man with disheveled hair opened his eyes and 2 golden rays shot out from the ancient underground palace. Bang! There was an explosion at the bottom of the sea, and an old man's aura was in a mess. It fluctuated between strong and weak, and when the intensity of his energy was at its peak, it had reached the reflector state. This was an old monster who didn't have much lifespan left. He had always been in seclusion and had internal injuries in his body. In reality, he had reached the illumination realm many years ago. There were 2 people following behind him. They used to be his children, but they were old and had become saints. This was also the reason why the Sea-Sky clan was restless. When the underworld declined and the powerhouses of the various races disappeared, there were still old monsters at the light realm overseeing the clan. Naturally, they were unwilling to lie low and wanted to restore their former glory. "He's Chu Feng," a saint reported. The boy from back then had already become a saint. "Chu Feng, are you courting death?" This old mirror-level monster obviously didn't understand the current situation. From his point of view, Chu Feng was still at the level of a lesser saint more than a year ago. At most, he was a saint, so he didn't think that Chu Feng was a threat. Even if Chu Feng came knocking on his door, he would only be courting death. Normally speaking, this was indeed the case. No one could break through from the saint level to the light realm in a year. This was simply unrealistic. This old monster's hair was disheveled. He ascended into the sky and looked coldly at Chu Feng as if he was looking at a dead man. Chu Feng had killed his way over and slaughtered his clansmen. From his point of view, this was unforgivable. He didn't feel that there was anything wrong with deciding to lead the way back then. He didn't care how many people by Chu Feng's side died. In his heart, the weak were prey to the strong. He felt that even if Chu Feng died, he deserved it. This meant that the Sea Sky clan had made the right choice by relying on the strong. Now, he felt that as a weakling, Chu Feng was simply courting death by coming knocking on his door without knowing the immensity of heaven and earth. Pow! He slapped forward with his palm, and laws bloomed. Light illuminated the void as he wanted to imprison Chu Feng and smash him into pieces. However, he quickly sensed that something was wrong. After the light realm energy erupted, Chu Feng actually didn't move and was as steady as Mount Tai. On the contrary, Chu Feng stretched out a hand, grabbed him, and directly pulled him over. It was too easy. Immediately, his scalp went cold and goosebumps appeared all over his body. Following that, his physical body and soul light broke apart inch by inch. He was rapidly disintegrating and exploding. You're also a light illuminator, but the choice you made was completely different from the Thunder God, the Sky Blade, and the others. People like you can't atone for their sins even if they die 10,000 times. Chu Feng's cold voice was like lightning crossing the sky and shaking the universe. You. Could it be that you're a god? The old monster from the Sea Sky clan shouted. How could this young man be so strong? He couldn't believe that Chu Feng could kill him as if he was slaughtering a dog. Chu Feng had always been very cautious. He was afraid that he would leak his god-level energy and cause the abyss to swallow him. Most of the time, he sealed himself. Even if he made a move now, it was only energy at the light realm. However, this old man couldn't catch up to the techniques he used. With a bang, the Sea Sky clan's ancient ancestor turned into a bloody mist and was immediately burned to ashes. Following that, Chu Feng flipped his hand and slapped out again. In the distant sea region, the giant city collapsed and the ancestral land exploded. It was unknown how many experts from the Sea Sky clan died tragically. Chu Feng was cold and ruthless. He didn't have any sympathy. At this moment, he had already turned into a great demon king. On a vast planet in the Azure Wave Galaxy, feather-sized snowflakes danced in the air. The land was covered in silver, and hundreds of thousands of miles of mountains and rivers were frozen. Very few people knew that there was a god overseeing this place. Chu Feng had arrived. He was prepared to slaughter the god and clean up the people who led the way here. In the Thunder Mountain range, there were many snow-capped mountains that were tens of thousands of meters tall. They were majestic and imposing. Wind and snow surged and rumbled like thunder. It was deafening, and in some areas there were even avalanches like the sea. Ordinary people didn't dare to approach at all. There was a continuous stretch of ice palaces that stood tall and proud here. On one of the highest peaks, there was a god sitting cross-legged in an ancient ice palace. Because of his arrival, the entire mountain range was covered in ice and snow. This was a man who looked to be in his 30s. He was majestic and intimidating. His brown hair was loose and his upper body was bare. His bronze-colored skin gave off a very oppressive feeling. He was very disappointed. The Ice God Palace was also considered one of the top 20 orthodoxies in the Een realm, but they still couldn't bring him the information he wanted. God above, my clan is working hard to find Chu Feng's child in the near future. An old man knelt on the ground. His words and actions were respectful and full of reverence. He also expressed that he had some clues. Since you were the first to submit to me, I won't blame you for waiting. However, if there is still no progress in the near future, don't count on moving your clan to the Yang realm. Moreover, your clan will be punished greatly. said the god sitting cross-legged in the ice palace. Yes. After the old palace master of the ice god palace kowtowed, he raised his head and wanted to say something. What do you want to say? I think we can start from Earth and force Chu Feng to come out, suggested the old man of the ice god palace. The elders kneeling behind him also nodded. I said before, we can't touch that place. The god-level evolver sitting in the palace said solemnly, I also want to bathe that place in blood. However, the celestial venerables have decreed that we can't approach that planet in case something big happens. The old palace master of the ice god palace was silent and frightened. At the same time, he felt very regretful. If they could start from Earth, many things would be much easier. However, even the celestial venerables from the Yang realm were afraid of Earth. This was a shocking secret that made everyone in the ice god palace anxious and fearful. The entrance to purgatory is there. Even the powerhouses aren't willing to talk about it. It hides great terror. The god in the palace said softly. He frowned because he actually felt apprehensive when he said these words. That was because a divine king had told him some old stories in the past. At that time, his scalp went numb and his body went cold. We can definitely bring Chu Feng's only descendant to this place, said the old palace master of the ice god palace. The brown-haired god said, yes, there isn't much time. The celestial venerables won't leave the Yang realm again. We can only do our best. If the final juncture comes and we don't care about life or death, we will naturally think of a way to bathe the sea of stars in blood. I don't believe we can't find them. He had just finished speaking when a glaring bolt of lightning appeared in the palace. With a puff, it was so fast that no one could imagine it. It pierced through the space between his brows and lifted this god up. He was dripping with divine blood. Chu Feng had arrived. He was now ranked at the divine general level and was only a step away from being called a king. Now, he used all his methods and attacked with overflowing killing intent. He launched a thunderous attack and used the sealed martial god lance to pierce through this person's forehead and lift him up in midair. Chu Feng's body shone with boundless rage and terrifying killing intent. He said, You harmed my relatives and even want to touch my son. You should be hacked to pieces. Everyone in the ice god palace was stunned. They watched as that demonic godlike male carried a deity and stood in the central ancient palace. Everyone was so scared that they shivered. Then, their bodies went soft and they were forced to kneel on the ground. Boom! Chu Feng waved his sleeves and the endless snowy mountains collapsed. The evolvers of the ice god palace exploded one by one and formed a destructive storm in this area. The sect was wiped out and many evolvers were killed in body and soul. Whoosh! At the next moment, Chu Feng disappeared with this brown-haired god and appeared at the edge of the abyss. It wasn't that easy for a god to die. In reality, this god still wanted to retaliate and fight. However, Chu Feng didn't give him the chance and blasted him into the abyss. The little Taoist pouted. Father, this is too boring. Even the god was killed by you. I still want to be stained with some divine blood before I reincarnate in the Yang realm to take revenge for my mother. He was in charge of carrying the stone fox and watching the battle from the side. I'll give you a chance next time, said Chu Feng. There were still 2 gods left in the nether realm. After killing them, it would be completely peaceful. After that, Chu Feng would head to the chaotic universe. The little vermilion bird followed him and was ready to fight at any time to help Chu Feng kill the god. However, it seemed like there was no need for that at the moment. With Chu Feng's strength as a quasi-god king, he could roam the nether realm and kill a few gods without any pressure. At the edge of the nether realm, there was a red ship that emitted a faint pressure. There were gods sitting on it. There weren't 2 but 3. They intimidated the entire nether realm. Chu Feng came with the little Taoist and Zhu Yan followed behind him. Chu Feng! Take him down. Haha! I didn't expect you to appear yourself. One of the gods laughed. He was delighted that he actually saw the main character. However, in an instant, they felt very uneasy because they knew that since the other party dared to come over so brazenly, he most likely had the confidence to do so. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The three gods actually hid in the chaotic mist. They were too cautious. They left the nether realm immediately so that they would have nothing to fear if they erupted with divine might. Chu Feng's expression was cold. He was waiting for them to enter the chaotic mist. He carried the golden divine sword and followed them in. He was ready to kill the gods. God-level fluctuations. The three gods were shocked. How was this possible? Had this nether realm native become a god in a year? It didn't make sense. Just like that, a battle between gods broke out. Almost at the moment of the exchange, the golden divine light in Chu Feng's hand surged and cut off the head of a god. Blood dripped from the divine sword. If one had to divide realms, Chu Feng was in existence at the peak of the divine general realm. He was only a step away from becoming a divine king. Even the gods of the Yang realm couldn't stop him. One of the gods was horrified. He turned around and fled into the chaotic mist. Another god's eyes flickered. He quickly fled in the opposite direction and escaped into the nether realm. He suppressed his realm and rushed towards the little Taoist. Boom! Flames overflowed into the sky. The little vermilion bird made a move to stop this god. Meanwhile, Chu Feng stood in the chaotic mist and threw out the martial god's spear. With a puff, it nailed the god who was fleeing into the chaotic mist and caused his body to explode. Chi chi chi. All kinds of laws interweave. Chu Feng activated the little 6 rays of time technique and swept through this area. Divine light surged. Regardless of whether it was a god whose head fell to the ground or a god whose body exploded, they could be reborn with a drop of blood and rapidly reconstruct their bodies. But now they couldn't escape the corrosion of the little 6 rays of time technique. They had just reappeared and reconstructed their bodies when they began to scream miserably again. They were disintegrated and truly destroyed in body and soul. Even if they had the death substitution talisman, it wouldn't work. That was because the difference between them and Chu Feng was too great. How could they compare to a quasi-divine king? The divinity granules spread out and were all absorbed by Chu Feng. There was also ancestral Tao matter that pervaded the air and entered his body as well, becoming a great tonic for him. It enshrouded his entire body in divine multicolored light and made him look more and more like a great demon king. On the other side, the little vermilion bird was fighting with that god. Both of them were suppressed to the Illuminator realm. Little sister, get out of the way. I want to avenge my mother. Watch how I join hands with my father to slay that god, shouted the little Taoist. The god that was fighting with the little vermilion bird was disdainful. A wimpy kid also dared to boast shamelessly? But he was also very anxious and wanted to escape. He was afraid that Chu Feng would chase after him and kill him. He really wanted to capture the little Taoist, but the little vermilion bird wouldn't give him this opportunity. At the same time, Chu Feng also strolled over. Whoosh! He turned around and fled. He didn't dare to continue fighting. Where do you think you're going? Watch my sky overturning seal slay a god, shouted the little Taoist at this moment. He directly smashed the stone fox on his back and aimed it at the god that was breaking out of the encirclement. The lame celestial venerable was in a daze. After that, he was so angry that he wanted to stomp his feet. Motherf ****, this really was a pair of father and son. This was simply Motherf ****. It was fine that he was tossed out by Chu Feng once, but in the end, he was smashed out by this little one like a brick and used as the sky overturning seal once more. The god that was charging over was still sneering at first with a look of disdain on his face. He even wanted to seize the opportunity to capture the little Taoist and took the initiative to meet the attack head-on. In the end, it was a tragedy for him in the next moment. He was completely horrified. With a puff, his bones and tendons were broken from the impact. He was covered in blood and his body was torn into pieces. Painful, it was too painful. He was a god, but his body was actually broken from the impact. What kind of stone material was this? He was filled with grief and indignation. His resentment simply overflowed to the heavens. If he knew that this was the true body of a celestial venerable, then his resentment wouldn't have surged to the heavens. Even though he was a god, how could he compete with a celestial venerable in terms of physical strength? Ah! He was screaming miserably over there, while the little Taoist was grinning and beaming with joy. Chapter 975. Haha, I've slaughtered a god. I blasted a god from the Yang realm into dregs at the age of 1. The heaven-warping divine might belongs to me. The little Taoist laughed maniacally. However, his voice was immature and his black gem-like eyes were blinking. He really couldn't embody his divine might. Seeing him being so cocky and laughing sinisterly, the Shur who was so angry that he couldn't stand this little thief anymore. Similarly, that god's mind was also on the verge of exploding. His body had been smashed into pieces by a brat. Was this true? He actually split into pieces. Boom. He could be reborn with a single drop of blood. Divine light surged as he rapidly molded his true body. He wanted to act violently, but in the end, Chu Feng arrived. He grabbed him by the neck and carried him into the primal chaos. I refuse to accept this. The god from the Yang realm roared. He felt too sullen as he was almost killed by a child. He looked at the little Taoist and then at the stone statue. What kind of stone is this? He wouldn't be able to die in peace if he didn't ask clearly. Now, he was suppressed by Chu Feng to the point where he couldn't move, but he could still open his mouth and speak. The Shur whose face was dark and shiny. It was fine that he was smashed away, but this little god even assisted him and said he was made of stone? You little god, are you courting death? I'm a celestial venerable, the Shur who said coldly. The god from the Yang realm stared at the Shur who and carefully identified him. In the end, he cried out loudly. He was extremely horrified because he recognized that this was likely a celestial venerable from the Yang realm in the past. He was terrified. This celestial venerable had disappeared back then and was now standing on Chu Feng's side? Before he could think too much, Chu Feng killed him. He activated the little 6 rays of time technique and killed him. A large area of divinity granules flew out, and wisps of ancestral Taoist substance pervaded the air. Chu Feng's body was resplendent like an immortal divine king as he stood in the primal chaos. The amount of divinity granules increased, and he became increasingly powerful. Very soon, he returned to normal and walked over with a smile to apologize to the Shur who, saying that the brat was insensible. The little Taoist also laughed dryly and said that he was in a moment of desperation. He saw the god rushing over and randomly throwing things to protect himself. He really couldn't hold back and attacked. Shur who widened his eyes. He looked at Chu Feng and said, "Worthy of being your own flesh and blood. He's definitely your son. He didn't run away." In its opinion, the nature of this father and son pair was too similar. Sometimes they really lacked morals. Chu Feng pretended not to understand. He was quite thick-skinned and said, "He's definitely my biological son. Look, his nose and eyes are as handsome as mine." The little Taoist rolled his eyes with all his might and didn't even want to pay attention to him. If it wasn't for the great devil Chu Feng snatching his black talisman paper, he should have been born in the world of the living. The stone fox glared at the father and son pair. It had encountered such a strange pair of father and son. It really wanted to teach them a lesson, but it was inconvenient for it to move. The little vermilion bird was also speechless as she looked at the 3 of them. The matters in the netherworld have mostly been settled. I've finally killed all these gods. Chu Feng sighed softly, but this wasn't the end of it. From the soul light of the god who had just died, he understood that there were other evolvers at the Illuminator and Saint level that came from the Yang realm. Wait for me here. After Chu Feng finished speaking, he immediately disappeared. With his strength as a super god, it was naturally like walking on flat ground for him to move unhindered in this universe. On that day, Chu Feng killed 18 people in a row and wiped out a total of 18 groups of people from the Yang realm. This shocked the entire Netherworld universe. After that, someone claimed to have seen a war between gods. Several gods from the Yang realm died, and their lives were harvested by someone. From the Sea Sky clan to the Ice God Palace, and then to the edge of the Netherworld universe, there were gods that perished. Unfortunately, no one knew who did it until now. Chu Feng was very calm. After getting rid of these people, he didn't feel any joy or excitement because this couldn't even be considered an appetizer. The real hunt had just begun. The true experts, such as the disciples of the great martial lord and Hun Yi, were mostly in the chaotic universe. Moreover, the bloodline of the celestial venerables had personally come to the chaotic universe. This was his main goal. He wanted to hunt down the descendants of those celestial venerables. He was finally going to set off. Chu Feng looked at the Sea of Chaos and then at a scarlet ship not far away. It had become an ownerless object. On it was a celestial venerable's decree. There was still half of it left. When he crossed the Sea of Chaos, half of the decree was destroyed. If someone uses the celestial venerable's decree to kill me, will the stone box be able to withstand it? Chu Feng's eyes were faint. Of course, this was the worst-case scenario. Normally, he would be extremely cautious. At the same time, he wanted to do an experiment now. Father, you're about to leave. I can't accompany you to the Sea of Chaos. The little Taoist sighed. He knew that if he followed, he would only be a burden. I'll set off on my own. You guys stay here, said Chu Feng. At the same time, he took out a talisman and handed it to the stone fox. He wanted to leave it for reincarnation. At this point, Chu Feng didn't have a single talisman on him. He threw one into the abyss. He didn't know if Yao Yao could reappear. He gave one each to the little vermilion bird and the little Taoist. They were destined to reincarnate into the world of the living. He gave the last one to the stone fox. He didn't want to leave a way out for himself. He wanted to rise from the ashes and walk the cruelest path for himself. He would cut off the old and nurture the new. He would wait for the divine fetus to transform. However, the stone fox didn't accept it. He told Chu Feng solemnly that the Celestial Emperor's old path was incomplete and lacked a corresponding breathing technique. He told Chu Feng to be careful. At the same time, he told Chu Feng to put away the purple talisman. No matter what, bringing it along was a safeguard. He wouldn't be afraid even if he was accidentally killed. Senior, you also need it. After all, I still have a path to take, said Chu Feng. The stone fox said, I don't need it. Since I've already escaped the foreign realm and arrived in this cosmos, it means that I already have a chance to break my fate. He had a certain boldness. He wanted to rely on himself to dissolve the restriction his master had left in his body, break the shackles, and transcend. I can either die here or use this tribulation to survive and be reborn. When I face my master one day, I won't have anything to fear even if I meet him face to face. He made up his mind. He would either die or transcend and stand shoulder to shoulder with his master. He told Chu Feng to put away the talisman. It might be able to protect him at the critical moment and allow him to reincarnate into the world of the living. Chu Feng put away the talisman and was no longer so vigilant against the lame celestial venerable. His intuition told him that the stone fox didn't have any evil intentions towards him. His previous vigilance was mainly because he had experienced life's great ups and downs and experienced all kinds of tribulations. He had no choice but to be cautious. I'm going on my way. If I succeed in hunting the god and wipe out all the enemies in the chaotic universe, I'll come back to visit you guys. If I fail, I'll directly reincarnate into the world of the living. I don't know when I'll see you again. Chu Feng said as they parted. I want to temper the little vermilion bird's temperament in the mortal world for 10 years. After that, I'll let her go to the world of the living to reincarnate, the stone fox informed him. Father, I think. The little Taoist hesitated for a while. His eyes were red and actually contained glistening tears. What's wrong? Chu Feng asked him. I can't help you with anything right now. I want to go on my way immediately and start over in the world of the living. I want to walk the path of the strongest genius. This universe is too small and the highest achievement is only the illumination realm. It's not enough for me to grow up and take revenge for my mother. It was rare for him to be so solemn. His eyes were red and he was on the verge of tears. This was a parting of death. He wanted to step onto the road of reincarnation. The little Taoist already understood why his biological father was so powerful when he saw Chu Feng using the mutant technique to absorb the divinity granules. He ran to the foreign realm for 100 years and completely threw caution to the wind. Although they had quarreled before and he had called his biological father a great demon, blood was thicker than water. They were father and son after all. Now, he was even more moved because he knew that Chu Feng's objective in doing this was to take revenge for his group of brothers and for Qin Luoying. The little Taoist decided that he had to rise up as soon as possible and go to the world of the living as a vanguard. One day, he would go with Chu Feng to kill the ultimate martial celestial venerables. Chu Feng was silent for a moment. This was his and Qin Luoying's only child. He had promised her that he would take good care of this child. Now, the little Taoist wanted to self-destruct and reincarnate into the world of the living. Did this mean that he ultimately couldn't protect this child? But Chu Feng also understood that he shouldn't stop him. The little Taoist should go to the world of the living if he had some accomplishments in the future. He should take advantage of this time to reincarnate and walk the path of the strongest. In addition, there was a strange substance on the little Taoist's body. It wasn't very serious now, but it still needed a celestial venerable or even an almighty to dissolve. However, he couldn't find such an existence with his status. But if he walked the path of reincarnation, the stone millstone in the radiant city of death could help him completely dissolve the gray fog. Your mother asked me to protect you and take good care of you, said Chu Feng. The little Taoist's eyes became even redder. He was a little sad as tears fell from his eyes. It's precisely because of this that I want to go to the world of the living. I want to reincarnate earlier to find her and protect her well. She's still my mother when I reach the world of the living. I won't change the way I address her. At the same time, this was also the first time he opened up his heart and revealed his root. He wasn't an old demon or a celestial venerable. He was merely a genius with exceptional aptitude and was reputed to have supreme aptitude. All right, you go. Chu Feng stroked his head. Father, we're about to part ways. I only want to ask you one thing when we're separated by life and death, said the little Taoist with a sigh. Speak. Chu Feng nodded. What exactly is our family's heirloom? Originally, they were still very sad and the atmosphere was melancholic, but the little Taoist's last sentence directly destroyed it. Perhaps he did this intentionally. He didn't want to separate in life and death and go on their separate paths. He wanted to laugh more. At the side, the stone fox and little vermilion bird were speechless as they looked at the father and son. Chu Feng sighed and took out the stone box. It's this, but it's not our family heirloom. I obtained it by accident. The little Taoist was stunned. He actually just wanted to ease the atmosphere and not be so sad. In the end, Chu Feng really told him and fulfilled his wish. Senior, can you see what this is? Chu Feng asked the stone fox. What can I see in my current state? The lame celestial venerable was actually itching, but he had no way to study it. After staring at it for a long time, he had some suspicions and speculations. Could it be that the wall from back then was only one side of this stone box? He said. Sigh, I'm going to reincarnate. Even if you give me our family heirloom, I can't bring it along with me. The little Taoist was regretful. He could be born in the world of the living, but how could he be born in this stone box? After that, Chu Feng experimented and used the stone box to store the celestial venerable's decree to see if he could deal with it. With a whoosh, he put the remaining half of the talisman on the scarlet ship into the stone box. Even if he moved it into the primal chaos, the talisman could be suppressed in the stone box. He had a plan in his heart. In the world of the dead, the celestial venerable talisman couldn't display its might, but it was different in the primal chaos universe. In the end, Chu Feng went on his way. He didn't use the large ship of the people of the Yang realm. Instead, he kept himself in the stone box and opened a small crack to cross the sea of chaos. Chapter 976. At the edge of the nether universe, Zhu Yan, Shi Hu, and the little Taoist were checking the items. Chu Feng had left behind many good things, including various artifacts and weapons. Some of them were divine weapons brought back from the foreign land. A stone egg caught the lame heavenly lord's attention. This was the stone egg that Chu Feng had obtained when he went to the Phoenix Star in the Immortal Galaxy. It used to be the base camp of the Undying Bird in the Netherworld, but the race had been destroyed countless years ago. This egg is strange. Is it the egg of the Undying Bird? Shi Hu was surprised. There was no time in the chaos. A 3-inch tall stone box passed through. It was too fast, and one of its faces emitted a faint luster as patterns appeared. Chu Feng went on his way alone, killing his way into the chaotic universe. This time, he was really going to kill, so he would go on his way alone. He would not bring anyone with him. He was going to give it his all. There was a gap in the opening of the stone box. Chu Feng was paying attention to everything outside. Half of the Heavenly Lord's decree was stuck to the gap, so everything was safe. Rumble. It was really dangerous to go through the chaos. Not far away there were thousands of thunders, and he could clearly see the glaring lightning. He believed that even a god would be destroyed if he went in. The Chaos Zone retained some of the original features before the creation of the world, so it was especially dangerous, and anything could happen. Of course, what people looked forward to the most were the primordial objects that grew in the chaos, such as the primordial gourd and the sword embryo on the ancient vine. There was once a man from the Yang world who found a golden ancient vine in the Sea of Thunder in the chaos. He plucked a sword embryo-shaped fruit from it, and it turned out to be extremely sharp. Once it was slashed, everything would be destroyed. It was said that the sword embryo was stained with the blood of more than one heavenly lord in the Yang world. Chu Feng had never encountered such an ultimate object. In fact, even if he encountered it, he would not be able to pluck it. If he dared to make a move, he was destined to be killed by the chaotic lightning. Or, he would be killed by such a plant weapon. All the primordial plants with great origins were difficult to pluck. In the past, when someone plucked a mutton-fat jade bottle from a snow-white tree in the chaos, even a heavenly lord was killed. One could imagine how terrifying it was. In the end, a powerful figure had to personally pluck it with great difficulty, paying a great price. Comparatively speaking, this primal chaos region was still better off. The so-called lightning symbols were damaged and incomplete, or else the power would be even more terrifying. At the very least, the primal chaos outside the great Yang realm was definitely many times more terrifying than the primal chaos here. Of course, the runes contained within the primal chaos formed here were also more complete and powerful. This kind of journey was very monotonous and boring. Chu Feng did not discover any creation. There was only chaos along the way. Huh! Suddenly, just as he was feeling bored, he sensed that something was wrong. The stone box was glowing not just from one side, but from the entire box. He could see it from the inside. The inner walls of the stone box were crystal clear. Of course, that was all. It didn't shine brightly. Almost at the same time, he felt an oppressive aura that made him feel incomparably dangerous. Then, he saw an inconceivable scene. Through the cracks of the stone box, he saw that the primal chaos in front of him had disappeared. It had been cleared away, and the so-called primal chaos mist was actually unable to approach. His eyes turned into two golden symbols. Fine patterns appeared and interweaved with light beams as he stared ahead. After reaching the quasi-divine king level, the fiery eyes of gold became even more astonishing. The runes in Chu Feng's eyes contracted and became increasingly resplendent. He saw the scene in front of him and was indescribably shaken. There was a person there? To be precise, it was a humanoid creature. Its entire body was golden, but it was too huge. Just by sitting there, it made people feel that the universe was insignificant. There was an oppressive feeling that could even suffocate gods. However, it was dead, and it was impossible to tell whether it was male or female. Its battle clothes were ancient and had long since been torn. The exposed body was very shriveled, and a layer of golden skin was stuck to its bones. Its head hung down. Its neck had been partially cut off, and it was powerless to straighten it. Chu Feng was shocked. He saw that there was a lot of metal powder and even weapon remnants in the distance. They had been destroyed by the light emitted by the hair. One had to know that it was only a corpse. Chu Feng was shaken. He saw a giant battle axe with only a small piece left. This weapon was at least at the Divine King level, but it was inferior to this creature's hair. Upon closer inspection, there was a lot of powder around this creature. They were all weapon dregs. It wasn't limited to the hair, but it was densely packed all around its body. No wonder even the primal chaos couldn't get close. How many experts had besieged it back then? Just what level has this creature reached? The most terrifying thing was that this corpse was surging with yang qi and overflowing with golden light. It was as if an immortal flame was burning the heavens. Even the primal chaos had to avoid it. An evolver from the yang realm? Chu Feng frowned. It had actually died here without a sound. Outsiders didn't even know. He always felt that this was an existence even more frightening than Taiwu. Chu Feng had already changed the direction of the stone box at the first possible moment. He was afraid that an accident would happen if the stone box rushed over, so he drove it around. However, not long after, he encountered another dangerous situation. The boundless darkness almost swallowed him up. He rapidly changed his direction and went around it. He opened his golden eyes and stared at the side. It was still a vast and spacious space. There was no primal chaos approaching as they were all repelled. There was also a creature there. It was emaciated and all skin and bones. Its entire body was dark and incomparably cold. It made people shiver all over. Even though it was hiding in the stone box with only a crack of the treasure exposed, Chu Feng still felt as if he had fallen into an icehouse. How cold was this humanoid creature? The yin qi was too dense. Chu Feng had never seen an evolver with such unimaginable yin qi. The most terrifying thing was that this creature was still so powerful even after death. There were many broken bones in the vicinity of this area. They were too densely packed. They were all left behind by the yin qi emitted by the colossal creature after its death. Chu Feng's scalp went numb. He saw that these broken bones were all at the Divine King level. Occasionally there would be flashes of runes. It was clear that this creature was very terrifying. Even if it was dead, once someone approached this enormous corpse, they would also die and become blood and bones. Chu Feng's heart palpitated. He felt shocked. Could this creature be the great Yin realm that Shi whose almighty master had deduced? He really couldn't think of where else there could be such a gloomy and bone-chilling evolver. Even if it had died countless years ago, its current gloomy chi was enough to strangle a divine king to death. In a split second, Chu Feng felt a headache. One had to know that even someone as powerful as Shi, whose master, that almighty from the Yang realm, had only deduced that there was a great Yin realm. However, there was no actual example, so it couldn't be truly confirmed. No evolver had gone to the great Yin realm before. But here, Chu Feng actually found people suspected to be from the great Yin realm. What made him tremble with fear the most was that there was also a golden humanoid creature from the Yang realm. These two people clearly seemed to have fought countless years ago. As for their evolutionary level, it was impossible to predict. There were traces of a prehistoric battle here that even the Almighty from the Yang realm didn't know about. There were actually visitors from the great Yin realm who had fallen here. Chu Feng was lost in thought. If he didn't have the stone box, he would undoubtedly die if he rashly charged into these two areas. There would be no suspense, just like those divine kings who had turned into bone dregs. For a moment, he was somewhat dazed. Could it be that the so-called broken chaotic universe had been destroyed by such a battle? In the past, whenever the chaotic universe was mentioned, it was said to be broken. Now, it seemed that an earth-shattering event had happened countless years ago. The lame celestial venerable combined his master's research, and believed that regardless of whether it was the foreign realm, the Yin realm where I'm from, or the little Taoist's Yin cold universe, they were all narrow spaces adjacent to the great Yang realm and could be ignored. But if the great Yin realm existed, we should now be on the dividing line between the two. Chu Feng was silent. He felt very frightened when he thought of Shi Hu's conjecture. Shi Hu's master had once said that if the Taiji diagram was used to divide the great Yang realm and the great Yin realm, there was no doubt that the so-called little Yin realm was only a very short segment on that curved line. It was even just a point. What era was this battle from? It's so mysterious and terrifying. Chu Feng sighed. He didn't have time to stay here, so he didn't think too much about it. He only knew that two humanoid beings from the great Yin realm and the great Yang realm had fought here in the past, and the consequences were too terrifying. Whoosh! The stone box tore through the air and entered the primal chaos once more. He didn't encounter any accidents along the way. The following journey was very dull. In order to speed up, he activated the celestial venerable decree and made it shine. It overflowed with strands of energy and supplied them to the stone box. As expected, what happened next was too fast. This was simply like the creation of the world. He crossed the primal chaos and nothing could stop him. Of course, Chu Feng was even more nervous. He was highly concentrated because he was afraid that he would accidentally run into that area and encounter those mysterious corpses. He was ready to change directions at any time. Fortunately, the journey could be considered smooth. He saw a tree that flickered with silver light. It wasn't more than 3 meters tall, but it was actually making squeaking sounds and filling the air with a rich fragrance. There were more than 10 fruits growing on the strange silver tree, and they were making sounds. Whoosh! Chu Feng didn't hesitate and rushed over just like that. A beam of light shot out from a crack in the stone box, cutting down a silver fruit and putting it away. Then, his fingers trembled, quickly controlling the stone box to escape from this place. He only stopped after rushing out quite a distance. This fruit actually moved. It was actually a silver mouse, its entire body shining, sparkling white. Previously, it was curled up, but now it unfolded its 3-inch-long body. What kind of situation was this? Chu Feng was stupefied. This mouse clearly had a fruit stalk on its body, something that grew from a plant. Soon afterwards, he recalled the records of a certain foreign ancient letter. Once a spiritual plant in the primal chaos produced a divine fruit and no one picked it for a long time, its entire body would continuously transform and develop intelligence, ultimately having a chance of becoming a spirit. Normally speaking, divine medicines couldn't become spirits, unable to cultivate. There were only a few exceptions, and now Chu Feng encountered them. Chu Feng was shocked. He was on guard, because this type of creature was rumored to be extremely unordinary. He didn't know what kind of reaction this silver mouse would have. He controlled the stone box, turning around and approaching that strange silver tree, carefully sizing it up. There was actually a monument here, buried in the primal chaos. What is this? How could there be monument inscriptions in the primal chaos? Chu Feng was incomparably astonished. He carefully identified it. It was the characters of the Yang realm. Even though he had learned a bit from the stone fox, the characters here seemed to be even more ancient than the ones he had learned. Ancient characters of the Yang realm? Chu Feng frowned. After pondering and researching here for a long time, only then did he recognize a small half of the characters, understanding a bit of their meaning. His expression immediately changed. Chapter 977. A message from a DU level evolver? Chu Feng was naturally shocked. The inscriptions were densely packed and difficult to decipher. It was written in a very ancient language from the Yang realm. Chu Feng studied it for a long time but could only recognize a portion of the word. The contents were naturally frightening. He looked directly at the end of the inscription. This was the part that disturbed him the most. The inscription was too shocking. It claimed to be a half-cripple on the DU path. There were 2 words after half-cripple. It was the name of the inscription's author, but Chu Feng didn't recognize it. It wasn't as if he didn't know anything. He'd been with the Stone Fox for a long time and naturally understood everything about the Yang realm. A DU level evolver was a terrifying existence. He'd almost reached the end of the path of evolution. Once he reached that level, outsiders didn't know what he would look like or what he would transform into. If there was no way out, then he could only continue the path himself. Even the Stone Fox was amazed and in awe of such a creature. He knew he didn't have much time left and wanted to enter the Great Yin realm to prolong his life. Chu Feng pondered over the inscription. The more difficult it was, the more interested he became. This was because it was left behind by a being at the forefront of the field of evolution. He deciphered a small portion of the meaning. This ancient being was like a DU-level being from an even more ancient era. In the end, he was defeated and was about to fall on the path of evolution, entering the middle and late stages of life decline. This person wanted to enter the Great Yin realm, but he couldn't find the way. A being of this level had naturally made all sorts of deductions and believed that the Great Yin realm truly existed. However, in the end, he only entered the lesser Yin realm after leaving the Yang realm. However, he also discovered abnormalities here. There were all sorts of traces in the primal chaos, and there was a battlefield from a very long time ago. The scene was extremely shocking. In the eyes of this being, these should be traces left behind by the ultimate powerhouses at the forefront of the field of evolution a long time ago. Meanwhile, as he continued forward, this person discovered new clues that left him moved and a bit horrified. He felt that this place wasn't simple originally, but it had been destroyed. In the past, this place might have been extremely glorious, and the level of the evolution civilization was a little too high. This person even saw a clue to the ultimate path of evolution in the Yang realm. What's going on? Chu Feng was a little dumbfounded. This self-proclaimed great cosmos-level half-cripple's train of thought was a little jumpy. Weren't the great universe creatures at the end of their lives? Why are you guessing the ultimate path again? Moreover, the people of the Yang realm also believed that the path of evolution would become more and more perfect with the passage of time. Why did the message left behind by this great cosmos being seem to indicate that there was another path? This caused Chu Feng's heart to thump violently. Naturally, he was somewhat excited. His frown deepened as he used all of his concentration to study the words on the stone tablet. He was truly a little regretful. He should have humbly consulted Shur, who and thoroughly studied the ancient writings of the Yang realm. Now, he could only deduce, constantly guess, and connect the context to identify. Chu Feng struggled to comprehend the inscriptions bit by bit. The more time passed, the more moved he became. Great waves surged in his heart. In the words of the great universe beings, it was mentioned that a long time ago, the path of evolution had its ups and downs. There were times of extreme glory and times of decline. Among them, there were times when the path of evolution had forked, and civilization had gone in different directions. The current evolutionary civilization was just a road that branched out after several forks in the road. When he read up to this point, Chu Feng's body stiffened, but his heart was trembling. There was only one path now. If it was backtracking, then it would be quite astonishing. The great universe beings believed that if they traced back, the other path wasn't necessarily wrong. However, where was the radiance of civilization on the other path of evolution? Chu Feng looked down and carefully studied the inscriptions on the stone tablet. Chapter 978. Where was the radiance of the other evolutionary civilizations shining? The greenest level being actually mentioned this question. There was such a question in the tablet inscription, and this was what Chu Feng had to decipher with great difficulty. From this person's point of view, the path of evolution had forked several times and seemed to have other secret. They were all very important checkpoints and could be said to be the most important nodes in the history of evolutionary civilizations. How could only this current path be preserved? The other paths should still be there, and they might even be more important. The greenest level being guessed that there was an even more splendid path of evolution than this one. Where did it lead to, and how could it be found? Uncultured, so scary. Chu Feng mocked himself. His head was hurting now. Even if he circulated his god-level soul light to carry out a deduction, he still couldn't recognize some words. This tablet inscription wasn't considered short, and he had only deciphered half of it. He vaguely felt that some paragraphs were incomparably important and needed to be understood thoroughly. He clearly knew that an extremely important record was right in front of him, yet he couldn't obtain it. He couldn't recognize it, and it made him sigh. He could only try his best to continue pondering. Ruin? Chu Feng frowned as he saw such an incomparably crucial word. Greenest level being mentioned this word with emphasis. It was related to a few key nodes in the history of evolution. This made Chu Feng rather shocked as his soul light flickered. What did it mean? He was practically burning his brain now, and his soul light was flaring. He combined the words he didn't recognize with the context to deduce, but he still didn't recognize them. Not long after, he used domain methods to carry out deciphering. That was because domain symbols were the carrier of the order between heaven and earth. They were the embodiment of a kind of mysterious energy. Chu Feng discovered that the words of the most ancient era in the Yang realm also had this kind of mysterious energy characteristic. However, the way of expression was different from domains. Relying on this similar characteristic, he carried out a deduction. For a moment, his spiritual power was greatly consumed, and it was as if his entire body was burning. In the history of evolution, every time a fork appeared and every time an incomparably crucial node appeared, it was always accompanied by ruin? Chu Feng finally studied part of the meaning of the word. It was as if it was burning the soul. Light flames throbbed, and his spiritual power blossomed with multicolored light like a torch. What ruin? Chu Feng was frowning. There were words, annotations, and conjectures behind the word ruin, but he really couldn't decipher it. Looking at the inscription, Chu Feng felt that this was an earth-shattering immortal steel. The things recorded on it were very important. That entity seemed to have discovered something and deduced something, wanting to leave something behind. What exactly is this ruin? What do these words mean? What did the great universe beings analyze? Chu Feng really wanted to know. At this moment, he also wanted to curse ruins? Kidney deficiency. Couldn't this great universe creature's message be a little simpler? Why did he have to use the most difficult words of the great Tao in ancient times? However, he had also gained something. The great cosmos creature had mentioned itself. Chu Feng revealed a dignified expression. Perhaps only a few short lines of words could be used to describe evolvers of this level. The great universe-level creature mentioned that it was ultimately a failed body, and that its evolved form was indescribable and too terrifying, so in the end, it wanted to leave the world of the living. Apart from extending its life, it didn't want to face its descendants in such a manner. An indescribable thing, a terrifying failed body, was it more appropriate to call it that? Chu Feng didn't know why, but he felt his hair stand on end and a chill run down his spine. Although the great universe-level creature didn't say much and simply mentioned it, the more Chu Feng thought about it, the more he felt it was terrifying. Chu Feng was lost in thought as he thought of too many things, such as purgatory, the radiant ghost town, the reincarnation path, and the clay idol at the end. He naturally thought of the most important nodes in the history of evolution that had influenced the past and present. Where did those forked paths lead to? In addition, he also thought of the stone box and the 3 seeds. At the same time, he also thought of the number 1 forbidden area in each world. What exactly was there? It actually produced talisman papers. There are more than 1 or 2 forbidden areas in the world of the living, and they seem to be even more powerful. Chu Feng's mind wandered as his thoughts ran wild. Next, he began to focus on the following paragraphs, but he really couldn't deduce anything about the secrets of the ruins. However, he could recognize the meaning of the words at the end. It was related to the silver divine tree in front of him. Back then, the indescribable great universe-level creature had entered this place and discovered traces of an ancient battlefield. It dug out some important secrets and also saw some medicinal herbs. Among them, this divine herb was one of them from back then. At that time, the great universe-level creature had sensed that it might die in the lesser world cosmos, so it made some deductions and divinations. It had a premonition that the small silver grass beneath its feet might one day become a spirit and achieve a different kind of evolution. During its deductions, it had always felt that this place wasn't simple and that unpredictable evolvers would appear. It suspected that it was related to this small silver grass, so it made some arrangements to help it achieve its goal. The great universe-level creature buried the remains of some terrifying beings near the small grass. They were all found in the primal chaos ancient battlefield, and they were all shockingly powerful experts in the past. Accompanying these prehistoric beings and absorbing their aura, the small silver grass might obtain the laws of those dead beings once it became a spirit. That was because the corpses also contained all kinds of order. Over time, the silver divine grass might really inherit those laws and order if it was constantly nourished. According to the indescribable great universe-level creature's guess, the silver divine grass would most likely transform into a quasi-innate level creature in the primal chaos. Is this how innate level creatures come to be? Chu Feng was doubtful. The great universe-level evolved being mentioned that in some ancient records of his era, there were people who cultivated innate level creatures in the distant past, and it was somewhat similar to this. Innate level creature? Chu Feng was bewildered. Now, his attention was focused on the silver divine tree. Originally, it was just a blade of grass, but now it had become a tree with a dozen fruits on it. One of the fruits fell into his hand. It was a silver mouse. Was it an innate level creature? Chu Feng felt that this ignorant mouse's entire body was flawless and had actually reached the domain of a god. However, its soul light was like a piece of white paper. It was very simple and didn't have any complicated emotions. There were only complicated patterns of order and so on. Chu Feng realized that a great universe-level creature had cultivated a strange tree, and its fruit had even become a spirit. It was quite terrifying. It was actually a divine mouse. Chi. He made his move again. A beam of light flew past and plucked another fruit from the tree. It entered the stone box and landed in his hand. Then, he was astonished to find that it was a curled-up puppy. It was as big as a fist and shiny as snow. After being plucked from the tree, it flipped over and stood up. Like the silver divine mouse, its thoughts were as pure as a piece of white paper. It was just that its soul light was branded with complicated law fragments, which was why it had become a god-level lifeform. Chu Feng was dumbfounded. He studied the two little creatures in his hand and discovered that they weren't dangerous and could obey his orders. They were like two newborn babies. Then, he studied the strange silver tree. It also didn't have any emotions. Moreover, its essence had condensed into a dozen fruits, so it didn't have many laws and order left. With his fiery eyes, Chu Feng could see clearly that there were some problems within this tree. After its divinity flowed out of its eyes and condensed into fruits, it was heading towards withering. The so-called becoming a spirit and realizing the transition of life actually came at the price of abandoning its body and bearing a different kind of life fruit. Chu Feng thought about it and plucked all 12 fruit. He put them into the stone box and transformed them into little animals. All of them were at the god level. There were fist-sized silver lions, white tigers, and snow-colored crows. Each and every one of them was extraordinary. They aren't innate creatures yet, but after becoming a spirit, this kind of transformation is still very strange. These are over a dozen divine beasts. Chu Feng made a judgment. This was very unexpected. There were over a dozen god-level thugs at his side. Chu Feng could use his own soul light to control them and teach them some things. Crack! At this moment, the strange tree broke into pieces and actually completely dried up and disappeared. Is this a different kind of rebirth? From a tree to a fruit, it transformed into 12 little animals. Chu Feng revealed a strange expression. In the end, Chu Feng took a look at the stone tablet. The last paragraph mentioned on it was a farewell. The great universe-level creature wanted to enter the lesser Een realm and take a look at the legendary abyss. That was because there were traces and hints on this ancient battlefield that said there was a pitch-black cosmic abyss in the cold and gloomy small universe ahead. Chu Feng was dumbfounded. Was the oddity in the abyss related to this? He had killed gods from the Yang realm and already knew from their soul light that there was a terrifying existence under the abyss. Its life had reached the end of its declining period and was about to be completely extinguished. The people of the Yang realm had once done an experiment to examine the radiation value and come to this conclusion. Now, Chu Feng was greatly moved. The existence under the abyss was actually the great universe-level creature that had left behind the inscription on the stone tablet here. After that, he set off again with the 12 god-level creatures. He felt that they were extraordinary and worth domesticating. Chi. The stone box streaked across the primal chaos and finally passed through the dangerous zone to enter another world, the dilapidated primal chaos universe. Chu Feng had arrived. On the way, Chu Feng gave the dozen or so little creatures a preliminary training and even passed on the breathing technique to them. These creatures looked ignorant, but they learned the technique extremely quickly. If we send them to the Yang realm, there will certainly be all kinds of explanations for this particular divine beast. It was born in the primal chaos, so it will most likely attract the attention of some orthodoxies. Chu Feng had studied them for a long time and discovered that they might be of great use. Chapter 979. He had finally walked out. He passed through the sea of primal chaos and arrived at the other shore. Chu Feng took a deep breath and relaxed his body. This world was very warm. The yang qi here was much denser than the little Yin realm, but it couldn't compare to the foreign realm. However, the spiritual qi here was rather dense and wasn't inferior to the foreign realm. As far as the eye could see, giant islands were floating in the distance. They were right at the edge of the universe and adjacent to the primal chaos. Chu Feng held the stone box in his hand and stood in the primal chaos mist. He looked into the distance at the beautiful mountains and rivers on those islands. The spiritual qi was like a tide. The so-called broken universe was because the war back then was abnormally intense. There were many ruins left behind. There were stars in this world, and there were also many islands and ruins floating in the universe. Chu Feng's body was like fried beans as it crackled non-stop. He was using the methods of the domain to reconstruct himself. Not only his physical body, but even the temperament of his soul light had changed. Even if one observed him with the heaven's eye, he wasn't Chu Feng anymore. Instead, he was another person with no flaws to be found. He changed his clothes and looked like a scholar. He was similar to some of the people from the ancient civilizations in the universe. He knew that in this broken universe, there were technological civilizations and ancient countries. The civilizations and races were different, and their clothing was also very different. However, they were all walking the path of transformation in the end. I won't kill some small fries for now. Chu Feng glanced around and saw that there were people stationed on some islands at the edge of the primal chaos. They were people from the Yang realm. His current goal was to become a god. I'm coming. Chu Feng's eyes were bright and incomparably resolute. He was going to start hunting the gods from the Yang realm and take revenge for those who had once made him laugh and made him sad and unforgettable. In a split second, many figures appeared in front of his eyes. Beside the abyss, his parents were still thinking about him before they died and exhorted him to live well. The big black yak, the Manchurian tiger, and the others roared heroically and turned into a bloody mist. There was also the yellow cattle, Ouyang Feng, and the others who fell down one after another, their bodies and souls extinguished. At that time, he was too powerless and could only watch helplessly. He couldn't even protect himself and could only hear the cold laughter of the evolvers from the Yang realm as he watched them massacre unscrupulously. Even though there was a great battle between Yao Yao and Yao Yao, in the end, their white clothes were still dyed in blood. Their eyes became listless, and they fell into the eternal darkness, never to appear again. The god of thunder, the sky blade, and the red spider lily walked out from their respective cultivation grounds one after another. Even though they knew they were no match for the enemy, they still wanted to fight against the enemy from the outer realms. In the end, all of them self-detonated. The curtain fell tragically, and blood dyed the starry skies red. I've come over in the end. A year of time is equivalent to 100 years of vicissitude. For this, I didn't hesitate to cultivate the forbidden technique, the minor 6 rays of time, all for the sake of settling the score with all of you. Even his child, the little Taoist, had to step onto the path of reincarnation once again because of this. He had to go to the world of the living to fight for him and avenge his mother. He had once promised Qin Luoyin that he would take good care of this only child, but in the end it could be considered that he had broken his promise. He wasn't able to do it. The little Taoist only wanted to go on his way and enter reincarnation once more. There was a flame throbbing in Chu Feng's chest. He wanted to let out a loud roar, shatter the heaven and earth, and slay all the gods in the Yang realm. His family was gone, and so were his friends. Everything was because of those evolvers from the Yang realm. His powerful soul light soundlessly swept across the island in front of him, and he found some important information from the minds of some saints. In reality, he had already slaughtered the gods before he crossed the primal chaos and obtained the information he wanted to know from the soul light of those few people. Now, he was merely confirming it a step further. Whoosh! He disappeared from where he was and fled into the distant starry skies. He left with extreme speed according to the coordinates he had found from those people's memories. Chu Feng had already confirmed that ever since Taiwu's Taoist body was eliminated and died in the abyss, no more celestial venerables descended from the Yang realm. He became even more cautious. As long as there weren't any celestial venerables, everything was fine. The Great Cloud Planet was an enormous planet that was extremely flourishing. There were many ruins in its surroundings, and all of them were floating in the starry skies. For example, there were enormous mountains that weren't inferior to stars. There were also some majestic ruins that were like countless asteroids arranged in rows. This was the dilapidated universe. Even in the universe and outer space, there were many such places of rubble and ruins. It could be seen how extraordinary this area used to be in the past. After being beaten to this state, so many abodes and other things were actually revealed and scattered in the sea of stars. On the enormous Great Cloud Planet, the Azure River surged with a bit of extreme mist. It was extremely magnificent. From the origin of the snowy mountains, it traversed countless mountain ridges and plateaus. It was at least 1,000,000 miles long. At this moment, Chu Feng was dressed like a scholar. He was standing on a small boat that flowed with the current and was approaching his destination. Hong City was situated on a plain. 1,000,000 miles long river flowed through this plain. There were all kinds of tributaries and lakes that made the land here incomparably fertile. Every year there would be a bumper harvest. Chu Feng abandoned the small boat. He had already learned enough on the way here, so he directly entered Hong City. The steel-like black city walls were extremely tall and flickered with all kinds of symbols. It was sturdy and immortal. It was said that even if a sea of evolvers at the Golden Arhat level attacked together, they wouldn't be able to penetrate the city. As soon as Chu Feng entered the city, he immediately felt the surging aura of the mortal world. It was incomparably bustling with people coming and going, and there was an endless stream of horses and carriages. Candied haws made from 1,500-year-old red cloud fruit. It can nourish one's skin and promote sleep. It's a fine product among spirit medicines. If it's not delicious, it's free. Flying dragon meat. 6-winged flying dragon that was just hunted in the starry sky. It's roasted until golden and tender. It's a sacred product among delicacies. Don't miss it when you pass by. Flowing gold ancient sword. A prehistoric sacred sword discovered after excavating the ruins. It's incomparably sharp and can slay demons and ghosts with a single thought. The brilliant sword light pierces the heavens. It's a rare fine product. It could be said that this huge city was abnormally bustling with evolvers everywhere. The streets and alleys were filled with cultivators from various races. Most of them were humanoid creatures, but of course there were also many different races. Chu Feng had a skewer of candied haws made from 1,500-year-old red cloud fruit in his left hand and a skewer of fresh, roasted flying dragon meat in his right hand. He ate them with relish. In reality, his soul light was quietly searching. He already knew that this was an important place. There were some gods from the Yang realm overseeing this place. That was because Great Cloud Planet was very important. It was one of the 10 vital stars in the broken chaotic universe. As a result, it had become an office for the descenders from the Yang realm. In a short while, he had already come into contact with 5 gods overseeing this place. There was also a group of saints who came from the Yang realm. Chu Feng didn't act rashly. He wanted to find out all the ins and outs. How many gods were there on this planet, and how many people from the Yang realm were there on the other planets? Otherwise, killing all the gods would alert the enemy and scare off the people from the other regions. At the same time, he was also understanding all kinds of situations in the broken universe. He was investigating old matters from over a year ago. For example, the whereabouts of the war god's Tao seat. Where did those people from the netherworld go? And how were they doing now? Ever since the Sage Master and Uncle Ming left the lesser netherworld cosmos, they hadn't returned. Chu Feng had always been very worried. Now that he had come to this world, he naturally had to investigate clearly. However, he felt that it wasn't optimistic. The people from the Yang realm were too powerful. They couldn't be stopped by the people of this world. The Wei family is recruiting people. They're currently lacking 6 attendants. The requirements are excellent and have outstanding innate talent. They must be selected from the divine sons and saintesses of 7-star and above evolutionary civilizations. Someone shouted in the distance. After that, a group of people rushed over. There was no lack of astonishingly beautiful female cultivators among them. They seemed to be the direct descendants of the great sex and had very strong cultivations. Chu Feng revealed an odd expression. What kind of background did this Wei family have? They were only selecting attendants, yet they actually wanted to select the best from the saintesses and divine sons of the great sections. It was a bit heaven-defying. There's no justice in this world. Divine sons and saintesses aren't worth much anymore. Sigh. An old man sighed. Someone retorted, who wouldn't be willing to enter the Yang realm? The quota is limited. The Wei family wants to recruit some heaven-bestowed geniuses to follow them into the Yang realm to strengthen themselves. So what if they're saintesses? Who wouldn't be moved by the chance to leave our broken universe and enter a complete universe of a higher level? Regardless of whether it was the universe Chu Feng was in, the chaotic universe in the broken universe, or the little Taoist universe, they were all known as pieces of the lesser netherworld. The Wei family's ancestor came from the Yang realm. Now that he has made contact with the Yang realm's emissary, he's ascending to the heavens in one step. Someone was envious. Chu Feng understood. This Wei family had the fortune to enter the Yang realm. That was why they could recruit people like this and make the inheritors of the first-rate orthodoxies have no choice but to bow down. It's really shocking. When the Lu family recruited people on another planet, our Cosmos 19th-ranked genius and 13th-ranked beauty, Fairy Yao Lin, actually went to serve them. How enviable! Even such a first-rate fairy went to seek shelter and willingly became a servant to accompany the Lu family's young master. This world is really hopeless. Shu, lower your voice. The Lu family's ancestor also came from the Yang realm and is extremely outstanding. And in the Yang realm, the Lu family's ancestor ruled the world and his fame shook the world. Sigh, the world has changed greatly. To many people, entering the Yang realm is like ascending to the heavens in one step. It made many divine sons and saintesses throw away their dignity and willingly become servants. What else can they do? Even if you're a genius, you still have to go through the path of life and death and obtain the recognition of the people of the Yang realm. Only then will you have the opportunity to enter the Yang realm. But who doesn't know that the path of life and death is too difficult? A few famous geniuses have died in the past few months. Who wouldn't be afraid? Now that there's a chance to pass directly, even saintesses and divine sons have to lower their head. Chu Feng listened quietly. He understood what was going on. Very soon, he understood even more concrete information. Whether it was a genius who had gone through the path of life and death or an aristocratic family with connections or relations with the Yang realm, in the end, they still had to go through the final selection. The emissaries of those orthodoxies and ancient clans in the Yang realm had spread the word that the Yang realm would choose people from the Yin realm and didn't want trash. Even the descendants left behind by those who were ordered to explore the Yin realm but couldn't return to the Yang realm couldn't be given too much preferential treatment. They had to perform well. Now, these clans were choosing divine sons and saintesses as servants because they wanted their own clans to perform well enough. Have you heard? Many people have been brought over from the Yin realm cosmos. There are many geniuses and goddesses among them. When the time comes, they'll definitely compete with the people from our chaotic cosmos for a quota. Yes, I've known about it for a long time. Wasn't there a girl called Ingzishian last time? She's very stunning and has excellent innate talent. She met up with the people from the banished immortal cave of our cosmos, and was nurtured with all their might. She's very outstanding. Rumor has it that a descendant of a celestial venerable has taken a fancy to that girl from the Ing family. But she's indeed stunning and as beautiful as a fairy. Chu Feng listened quietly. He felt that he might see those old friends who had disappeared. Yuan Mo, Zi Luan, Yuan Shirching, Yuan, Vermilion Bird Fairy, and the others should all come. Even clairvoyant Du Huijin, Yi Qingru, and the others might be brought over passively. Chapter 980. We don't know if those who crossed the Sea of Chaos to the Netherworld will have any gains. There's not much time left, so we have to make preparations to cut off our means of retreat. Send more people over now. There were some divine mountains in Hong City surrounded by the city. There were pavilions, waterfalls, flowing springs, clouds, and beautiful scenery. There were gods overseeing this place. They were discussing countermeasures. The people who went to the Netherworld hadn't returned with any good news. The last contact was disappointing as there wasn't much progress. Now, the people of the orthodoxies couldn't sit still anymore. They had to take the risk before leaving. Otherwise, no one could bear the blame of the celestial venerables. The atmosphere is a bit tense now. Even some ancient families in the world of the living have sent envoys to participate. I'm afraid they'll succeed quietly. Impossible, they don't have any better methods. On a beautiful mountain peak, a golden waterfall hung down. A few gods stood side by side and gazed into the distance. They were under great pressure. The orders from above were that, if there were no results, they didn't need to return to the world of the living. Finally, the seeds of the netherworld aren't bad. There are good results. Some people are nourished by the yang energy and actually grow at an astonishing speed. The initial tests are satisfactory. Even the overseeing divine king revealed a long-lost smile. The few of them were discussing and contacting the gods on other planets. They still had to take action against the netherworld. Some of them wanted to go there personally to carry out the final search. The situation has become more and more delicate recently. Even the powerhouses have joined in and ordered their disciples to find some seeds. It's not the seeds of the netherworld or those geniuses, but a true seed. It's said to have been lost in an ancient era. If obtained, it might be helpful to those who have almost reached the end of the path of evolution. Oh, I also heard the Divine King mention this. The pressure from above has suddenly increased. This so-called Yang World Seed is worth all the other fortunes. The powerhouses are all tempted and want to take action immediately, but they can't give us what the seed looks like. It's really giving me a headache. Their expressions were bitter. They hadn't even found the shadow of the two supreme treasures from the world of the living. Now they had to find another Yang World Seed. This made them worried. Yes, the Divine King sent news. Suddenly, a god with a head full of blue hair was moved and became serious. He looked to be around 30 years old, but in reality, he had experienced a lot of time. In his hands was a special communication device, and on it was information displayed. The Divine King's divine voice rang out. This is the seed that I've told you about. It's the information that the lords from the Yang realm just sent over. Study it carefully. If you can find it, you'll be able to ascend to the heavens in a single step. You'll become divine kings overnight. These words moved the deities. They were stirred up inside, but they also knew that this type of mission was likely difficult to complete. However, they still quickly expressed that they were going to do everything they could to pursue it. The information showed that the surface of the seed was wrinkled, and it was round in shape. However, it was a bit withered and didn't have much luster, as if it had lost all its vitality. It was suspected to be a dead seed. The few gods were stunned. This was the seed that even the mighty figures of the Yang realm were moved by. There was nothing special about it. It could even be said that it was quite ordinary, no different from the common species in the wilderness. Then, one of them read the information. It's recorded in a solitary letter from the most ancient era. This attracted their attention, and they all revealed strange expressions. This was top-secret information that involved an extremely high level. They felt that even if they knew about it now, their memories would be erased when they returned to the Yang realm. Some secrets weren't something people of their level could come into contact with. A certain celestial venerable's master had once gone to visit a friend and accidentally discovered a terrifying danger zone that was suspected to be the resting place of a cosmic-level evolved being. However, after approaching it, he discovered that the creature had already passed away in meditation and had been dead for many years. There, he discovered a letter left behind by a cosmic-level evolved being. It could be said to be extremely ancient, and it actually mentioned a seed. If this seed was found, it might be able to temporarily stop the decay of this cosmic-level entity. It might not necessarily die in the end. The letter also mentioned that this cosmic-level entity had once released a small dragon to enter the Yang realm to search for this seed. However, it never returned, and after calculating the time, it should have been as long as 100 million years. Its origins are too great. The few gods exclaimed. Is there only one seed? A god's eyes flickered. In the distance, Chu Feng was strolling through the city, but a wisp of his soul light had entered the center of a beautiful mountain peak. He was secretly observing the few gods and listening to their conversation. His heart trembled when he heard the word seed. More than 100 million years have passed. Even if it's a divine seed or a heavenly seed, it should have rotted by now. What else could be left? You have to know that the Yang realm seed has been corroded by Yin energy for a long time, so it's even easier for it to rot. Not necessarily. Nowadays, all the almighty beings are coveting it, and even the celestial venerables are pressuring us. There's no one who doesn't want to obtain it. This is enough to prove that it's extraordinarily extraordinary and definitely won't rot. These materials contain the speculations of the almighty beings. The seed recorded in the letter from more than 100 million years ago simply doesn't know when it originated. Perhaps it's related to a certain forked road in the history of evolution. The few gods were discussing as they stood on a spiritual mountain surrounded by rosy clouds. The golden spring surged, but they didn't know that someone was coldly watching them. In the same city, Chu Feng was very far away. He was dressed like a scholar, but he could clearly sense everything here and hear their conversation. In the end, after the 5 gods had a discussion, they decided to send more people into the netherworld. At the same time, they contacted the gods of other vital planets and prepared to negotiate. They would set off in 3 days. Chu Feng's expression was calm, but killing intent lingered in his heart. He was also preparing to move. If he followed them into the primal chaos, it would be a good opportunity to make a move. If he eliminated them there, even the divine kings of the broken universe wouldn't be able to sense it. After eliminating enough gods, he would then quietly break through and blend in with a group of geniuses. He would then sneak into the Yang realm. This might be the best choice. Otherwise, if he really forced his way into the Yang realm, he might be eliminated in minute. A god said, after cultivating for more than a year, Divine Master Huang has completely recovered. The other old Divine Master is also fine. They will follow along. I hope they can deduce everything this time and make Chu Feng have nowhere to hide. Chu Feng knew that the Divine Master Huang this god was talking about was definitely that old weasel. His attainments in the field of divination were astonishing and he was known as a Divine Master. Chu Feng was very calm. He still stayed on this planet and didn't reveal himself. 3 days later, the gods really made their move. They wanted to join forces and set off. There wasn't much time left. The passage connecting the Yang realm and this universe was about to close. If they still didn't have any harvest, then there really wouldn't be any time left. Swoosh! Chu Feng arrived at the edge of the broken universe and hid in the primal chaos. Chapter 981. It was extremely dangerous in the primal chaos, and anything could happen. Some people discovered an indescribable giant corpse when they were crossing. They would be corroded by the decaying matter it emitted when they approached it, and their divine foundation would be completely destroyed. There were also people who encountered endless order runes that were extremely glaring. Even a noble divine king would be torn to pieces in a breath's time, never to be reincarnated. There were also people who discovered an indescribable thing before the opening of the sky. Once they approached it, 90% of them would die. Occasionally, the returnees would experience strange changes and live a life worse than death. Of course, the more dangerous and terrifying a place was, the more likely it was to contain opportunities. Death and opportunities always coexisted, and they were only separated by a thin line. The ship was very fast, and it carried a total of 11 gods. The hull of the ship was made of special brass, and there were fine patterns on it. Those were the law fragments imprinted within, ensuring that the ship was sufficiently sturdy. The 11 gods stood motionless on the deck of the ship and gazed ahead. Some stood with their hands behind their backs, some carried battle swords, and some had rainbow-like eyes as if they wanted to see through the primal chaos. The surrounding mist surged, and it was all primal chaos. The brass ship seemed to be riding the wind and breaking through the waves, passing through the obstacles like a beam of flowing light. It was too fast. The 11 gods were like fossils that had existed since ancient times, but their bodies were filled with terrifying energy. Their eyes were very frightening when they opened and closed. This is our last chance. If we don't gain anything, we might be exiled to the netherworld forever and never be able to return. We will die in a foreign land. One of the gods spoke in a low voice, and his expression was very cold. If they couldn't return, they would go crazy even as gods. If it really comes to that, we will clear the place and wash the starry seas of the netherworld with blood. We will create a heaven and earth that contains yang qi and evolve the secret realm of the god. It's easier said than done, but if it really comes to that, I won't object no matter what happens. Then there was silence. No one spoke again, and the gods were silent. They really didn't want to stay in this world. Crack! In the distance, lightning was concentrated like a waterfall from the 9 heavens. One after another, they were densely packed and interweaved there. The brass ship made a detour, and the celestial venerable's decree on it glowed, blocking the danger. The 11 gods stood tall with an oppressive aura as they gazed into the distance. Other than that, there was a group of evolved beings at the illuminator level sitting cross-legged on the deck. They didn't move at all and were very dutiful. They were all wearing ancient armor with cold weapons on their knees. As for the saints, there were more than 100 of them. They sat in a corner and were extremely quiet. With so many people gathered together, the yang energy was dense and the vitality was vast. Most of the forces from the yang realm were gathered here, leaving only a small portion to guard the damaged chaosverse. They wanted to succeed in this battle. Otherwise, no one would be able to return, all of them dying in a foreign land. Behind the brass ship, a fist-sized stone box was flying. It locked onto its target and followed it. Chu Feng was estimating the distance. Now that he was far enough away from the chaosverse, perhaps the best opportunity to strike had arrived. He had approached them from a close distance. The stone box had concealed all of his aura, so no one could discover him. He already knew the strength of the people on the brass ship. I have to deal with the celestial venerable's decree first, then get rid of the old weasel hiding in the cabin. However, it's most afraid of death, and its protective measures are in place. If I touch it first, I might alert the enemy. Chu Feng was only afraid of the artifacts left behind by the celestial venerable. As for the gods themselves, he wasn't very worried. I have to think of a way to provoke the priest on the ship. It'll be fun if it backfires. Chu Feng pondered for a while and revealed a faint smile. He already understood that the old weasel had almost been beaten back to its original form when it tried to make a forceful deduction last time and was almost destroyed. The stone box was getting closer and closer to the hull of the ship. In the cabin, the old weasel and another priest were sitting cross-legged. At this moment they both felt a little uneasy. Their attainments in the field of divination were extraordinary, so they were naturally very sensitive to their own safety. "I don't know why, but I've felt a little uneasy ever since we set off," said the old weasel. The other old priest said, "Yes, I also feel that there might be unforeseen events during this trip to the netherworld. Could it be that the abyss is becoming more dangerous? Moreover, I actually felt my heart palpitate just now. Just like me, I actually felt a moment of fear." The old weasel's expression changed, and the hair on his body stood on end. He sat there cross-legged with a faint gaze. In an instant, he quickly threw out some tortoise shells and carefully deduced, wanting to divine what would happen when they went to the netherworld universe. "Great calamity? We might die if we go to the netherworld universe?" The two priests were afraid. They both began to divine and calculate their own fate. Where exactly would the danger come from? "It seems to be related to that supreme treasure. I can only vaguely feel it, and it's hazy and chaotic. I can't accurately divine it at all." The two's expressions were unsightly, and they both revealed expressions of worry. "This is Chu Feng's blood, and there's also a damaged battlesuit. Let's use this to try and divine him. That supreme treasure should be on him, so it'll be relatively easier this way. But we're still in the primal chaos and the distance is too great. It's too difficult to target him. I'm just trying. If it works, then it's fine. If it doesn't, then forget it. Otherwise, it's too dangerous ahead. I keep feeling terrified. If I die in the netherworld universe, I'll be too unwilling." They began to deduce and calculate carefully. At this moment, one side of the stone box was emitting a faint light, and the patterns on it were clear. It was a topographical map of mountains and rivers. Chu Feng already knew that once the stone box shone, it was equivalent to completely deceiving heaven's secrets. He didn't have to worry about anyone carrying out all kinds of divination against him. In the cabin, the old weasel coughed up blood. His face was deathly pale, and his body had become much weaker. He simply couldn't believe it and said, "We're so far away, so why is the backlash so powerful?" On the other side, the old priest's face was also waxy yellow. Just now, blood spurted out of his nose and mouth, and what he lost was all blood essence. It made their bodies extremely tired. When I was deducing just now, I was actually alarmed. It was as if a colossus was right in front of us and staring at us. What's going on? I can't analyze anything at all. The more bewildered they were, the more uneasy they became. They really wanted to figure out what was going on. After a few times, the two of them fell heavily into the cabin. They breathed in more than they breathed out, scaring the Tao children who were serving them and causing them to run out in a hurry. The 11 gods were alarmed and rapidly rushed into the cabin. They attached great importance to the two priests. Chu Feng also moved. He approached at extreme speed from the primal chaos and stealthily boarded the large ship with the stone box. He appeared at the bow of the ship, opened the stone box in a split second, and rushed towards the celestial venerable's decree. Whoosh! He very easily put the decree into the stone box and immediately closed the lid, isolating its aura from the outside world. This was what he was most afraid of, but he also understood that if no one activated it, this decree wouldn't take the initiative to attack. He had killed gods in the netherworld and searched their soul light, so he roughly knew a simple activation method. Crack! After losing the celestial venerable's decree, the large brass ship immediately encountered an enormous resistance. Even if there wasn't any primal chaos lightning nearby, there were still some rule fragments and so on. It was extremely dangerous. Sparks flew in all directions on the ship's body, and sonorous sounds rang out as it was being corroded by an indescribable energy. What happened? Not to mention the illuminator, even the 11 gods in the cabin couldn't remain calm. They felt their blood run cold. If an accident happened while traveling in the primal chaos, they could easily be completely annihilated. Chu Feng's disappearance didn't attract anyone's attention. Although he came for revenge, he was extremely cautious. He was worried that there were other celestial venerable objects. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The gods all rushed out and immediately cried out in alarm when they saw that the bow of the ship was empty. The celestial venerable's decree was gone, and they immediately revealed terrified expressions. As for the other illuminators and saints, they were also stunned. That decree had suddenly disappeared, and they didn't see the specific situation clearly, so they didn't know what had happened. Without this thing's protection, everyone would undoubtedly die. They would be struck to death by the lightning in the primal chaos sooner or later. "Return!" someone shouted loudly. He was completely anxious. Chu Feng watched from afar. He reckoned that these people shouldn't have any other celestial venerable object. However, he wasn't in a hurry to make a move. He just watched just like that. The large ship turned around and sailed back with all its might. During this process, the hull of the ship buzzed and fine cracks appeared. It was injured by some drifting order fragments in the primal chaos, and if this went on, it would inevitably disintegrate. The 11 gods quickly took action to resist this kind of corrosion. How did the celestial venerable's decree disappear? Could it be that it was taken away by some creature? That's impossible. Who would dare touch it unless there was an object or creature of the same level? A god muttered. His face was ashen, and he gradually revealed fear. Don't scare yourself. Perhaps some ineffable laws appeared in the primal chaos and cut off the celestial venerable's decree. Kacha. The large ship collided with a withered bone in the primal chaos, and the bow of the ship exploded into pieces. It was unknown when this jet-black bone was left behind, but it was terrifyingly hard and flowed with black light. After losing the protection of the celestial venerable's decree, the brass warship couldn't hold on any longer. The primal chaos was just this terrifying, and anything could happen. Ah! A wave of cries rang out. A great crisis was approaching, and everyone was alarmed. Chu Feng appeared. He had already confirmed that the other party didn't have any backup plans. When he descended on the large ship with the stone box in hand, the group was shocked. A person emerged from the primal chaos, appearing so abruptly. How could they not be overwhelmed with shock? "You are Chu Feng," a saint cried out in disbelief. How could a native of the Yin realm come here and dare to face them? Although this was their goal, everyone was somewhat uneasy now. Even the gods felt their bodies go slightly cold. If he didn't have a certain level of confidence, how could this young man from the Yin realm dare to come here? "Let the person behind you come out," an illuminator shouted. "Capture him." A god made his move. No matter what, even if there were terrifying experts nearby, they couldn't care so much. Now they had to capture Chu Feng first and use him as a hostage or kill him directly. They didn't believe that Chu Feng could rely on himself to start a war with them. This was simply unrealistic. It had only been a year, and no one could grow so quickly. "There must be a creature coming out from the abyss," a saint said while trembling as he looked at the surrounding primal chaos. In reality, this was also the speculation of the 11 gods present. The Yin realm's final reliance was there, unless a creature came out from there. Bang! A god attacked Chu Feng quickly and fiercely. He wanted to control him as soon as possible, and his silver palm was covered in complicated law symbols. Chi-chi. However, in a split second, Chu Feng's entire body shone brightly. His sword wings covered the sky and hacked continuously. In a split second, this person's arm disintegrated and turned into a bloody mist. A sword light flashed, and that person's head flew up. Bang! The sword wings vibrated, and the headless corpse of that god disintegrated, turning into fragments and a bloody mist. A large amount of divinity granules flew over and gathered toward Chu Feng. Everyone was scared out of their wits, including the remaining 10 divine-level experts. What kind of power was this? He had eliminated one of their gods in a single encounter. The remaining gods were shocked and terrified. At this moment, they felt a chill from head to toe. This native in their eyes actually dared to come over because he was strong enough. He was relying on himself. Kill. They attacked together. No matter what, there was no way out now, so they could only brace themselves and fight. The people of the Yang realm understood that since he had killed Chu Feng's parents, annihilated his relatives and friends, and even his Dao companion had fallen, it was impossible for him to be merciful. Chu Feng's eyes were red. He had cultivated for 100 years and practiced forbidden techniques in the foreign realm just for this moment. Now that they were exchanging blows, he went all out. Bloody light splashed everywhere as several gods collapsed, and divine blood sprinkled everywhere. God General? How was this possible? They almost didn't dare to believe it. Chu Feng had become a God General? Chapter 982. Only a short period of time had passed, yet that little native that they hadn't paid any attention to all those years ago had actually broken through from the saint realm to the god realm in a short year and was ranked at the peak of the divine general realm. It was truly shocking. They were terrified. This kind of speed of evolution would scare people to death in the Yang realm. How could it appear unless it was during those special periods in ancient times? In the underworld universe, the laws were incomplete, and the heaven and earth were incomplete. In addition, there was a ceiling. The highest one could reach was the Illuminator level. How could he actually reach this step? Was he going against the natural order? Chu Feng's sword wings flapped, and he was like a 12-winged god king. He whistled through the world and beheaded another god. No one could stop him. He's a Yin spirit. How could he reach this step? Someone among the Illuminator-level experts growled. In the past, even they could look down on the underworld and look down on Chu Feng. But now, this little native had actually evolved to this level. On both sides of Chu Feng's body, the 12 wings flapped, and the terrifying order patterns spread out like a surging river. The Illuminator exploded on the spot. At the same time, the group of people around him suffered and disintegrated. They were all considered experts, but they died tragically under a casual attack from Chu Feng. Demon! The group of saints was terrified. They had never thought that there would be such a day when they came to the underworld. Originally, they had descended into the lower plane with the attitude of looking down on the world. Break out of the encirclement, a god shouted. There was no way to continue this battle. If this went on, everyone would die. Who could defeat a god general? However, everyone was in despair. Outside the brass warship was primal chaos that contained fragments of the laws. Even a god would die if they were hit by it accidentally. I don't believe in miracles. No one in this world can become a god so quickly, a god roared. He absolutely didn't believe that Chu Feng could rely on himself to rise so quickly. He must have some shocking secret on him. Bang! The response was a fierce punch. Chu Feng's fist was sparkling and resplendent. It emitted a 5-colored divine light, causing the space to explode and the nearby primal chaos to boil. This deity did everything he could to resist, but the disparity was too great. The weapon he produced released a clear, crisp sound, full of crack. A divine artifact was destroyed right there. Moreover, his body was on the verge of destruction as well. The barrier of light around his body had been penetrated by that fist, and was completely blasted apart. The various divine chains of order he'd activated were breaking apart as well, and all sorts of talismans were being obliterated by that fist. Puff! This god's corporeal body was penetrated, and even his divine soul was exploding and disintegrating. Buzz! The void trembled because at the same time that Chu Feng utilized the little 6 rays of time technique to kill a person, he didn't give them the chance to be reborn from a drop of blood and reconstruct their true bodies at all. He directly disintegrated them into divinity granules and rapidly smelted them. It was fine if he didn't kill them, but once he did, his body and soul would be destroyed. Even if he was a god, he would lose the chance to reincarnate. Too powerful. No one can keep this Een spirit in check. Everyone's faces were ashen. The divine evolvers were fighting with their lives on the line, but they were also falling one after another. They believed that the reason why Chu Feng could rise so swiftly was related to the Yang realm treasure they were looking for. It was on him, and as a result, it caused him to advance by leaps and bounds. If one were to look into it deeply, there was indeed some connection. After all, without the stone box, Chu Feng wouldn't have been able to bring his corporeal body into the foreign realm, and as a result, he wouldn't have been able to become a god. They'd only exchanged blows, but the corpses of the deities were already strewn all over the place. But 90% of the people didn't dare to escape. Just now, someone had jumped off the brass ship, but in the blink of an eye, the nomological fragments in the primal chaos sliced him into pieces, and his divine soul was forever destroyed. "Where's Jiangzhou? Where's Su Hong?" Chu Feng shouted. Those 2 gods were the first to enter the Een realm universe. 2 of their incarnations were destroyed by Yao Yao, and their vitality was greatly injured. But in the end, their true bodies were still there and they hadn't died. He was sure that those 2 hadn't come and weren't in the cabin. Bang! Tens of thousands of beams of light shot out from Chu Feng's body, and every beam was like sword light. He flapped his 12 wings and pounced on the deities, unleashing a massacre here. Ah! A god let out a blood-curdling scream. Even though he was very strong, there was no way he could stand shoulder to shoulder with a divine general. After being swept by Chu Feng's sword wings, not only did his head fall to the ground, but he was also chopped at the waist. Following which, hundreds and thousands of sword chi blossomed in his body, as though a sun was being nurtured in his flesh. In the end, he exploded with a bang. Divine matter surged, and countless granules flew up. That was the most fundamental energy, and it converged toward Chu Feng. Another god had thoroughly died. This is an evil technique. Oh my god, the evil lord of the 6 paths, special technique. Finally, someone recognized it and shouted loudly with a terrified expression on his face. Those who were killed like this would suffer torment. In the process of comprehensive decomposition, all kinds of beneficial substances in the corporeal body and soul were extracted. It was as though someone was refining a great medicine, and it was extremely tragic. Everyone's expressions were gloomy and filled with fear. At this moment, even the few gods that were still alive turned around resolutely and rushed into the primal chaos. Even if they were to die, they didn't want to be like being boiled medicine. They were sacrificed alive and disintegrated into divine granules and ancestral Taoist matter. How terrifying of a destruction was that? Where do you think you're going? How could Chu Feng give them the chance? The sword wings unfolded, and he was as though a divine king had descended into the world. He was invincible, and after he swept past, another 2 gods were chopped into pieces and collapsed on the large ship. Bang! The most terrifying thing was still his fist. When he smashed out like this, there was nothing he couldn't overcome. Densely packed runes curled around his fist. Those so-called secret treasures, defensive secret techniques, and so on couldn't stop him at all. They were penetrated by his fist, and the gods exploded in a bloodbath on the ship. He was slaughtering a god. The following battle was like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Chu Feng was incomparably powerful, and no one could stop him. It didn't take long before the 11 gods were almost completely annihilated. There was still one god left who rushed into the primal chaos, but Chu Feng caught up to him and used the Vairocana fist to directly kill him. There was no one on the deck. They had all jumped into the primal chaos. But the saints were already dead when they jumped down, and the illuminators couldn't struggle for long either. They would be swallowed by all kinds of unknown dangers and wouldn't survive either. This area just happened to have a sea of lightning that was flickering with radiance. In the end, with a bang, everyone who left the brass ship was completely killed and turned into ashes. The brass ship was a divine-grade treasure after all, and there were all kinds of law runes engraved on it. Although sparks flew in all directions, it was much stronger than those saints and didn't disintegrate. Chu Feng didn't make a move against those people, and they were already buried in the primal chaos. He walked into the cabin and saw the old weasel and an old man at a glance. Both of their faces were ashen, and they were now in complete despair. The 11 gods had all died, so how could the two of them be Chu Feng's opponent? Apart from divination, their combat strength was actually very low. Chu Feng could poke a large group of them to death with a single finger. With a bang, Chu Feng lifted the old weasel over and held its neck. He looked down at it again and again. This old thing had divined the people around him, but now, not a single one of them was left. They were all dead. Squeak, squeak. The old weasel's eyes darted about, and he was so frightened that he couldn't stop screaming. He was very afraid of death and really didn't want to be killed like this. However, he also had a premonition that things didn't bode well for him. Look at your shifty-eyed face. You're definitely not a good thing. Why are your eyeballs darting around? With a paw sound, Chu Feng slapped the weasel's head. Of course, he didn't use any force, or else he would still die even if he had 10 lives. Chu Feng, immortal Chu, you're truly a heaven-warping genius. You rose to prominence in a single year and moved unhindered under the heavens. There are no longer any opponents. You can be said to be the strongest genius in the history of evolution. You've surpassed the gods and are comparable to the heavenly venerables when they were young. No, you've similarly surpassed. Chu Feng was speechless. This old weasel was too greedy for life and afraid of death. He hadn't even used any torture, yet this fellow was already kneeling and spouting nonsense. Shut up, you'll answer whatever I ask. First of all, will the apex martial saint and the other heavenly venerables come? All right, the strongest genius in the history of evolution. I'll answer whatever you ask. The old weasel was very cooperative. Moments later, Chu Feng obtained a lot of information he wanted to know. The only regret was that he couldn't interrogate the old weasel's divination chapter. The related soul regions had been restricted by the ancestor. There was an even older weasel? Chu Feng revealed a strange expression. He felt that this lineage was extraordinary. Slap. In the end, Chu Feng ended its life with a slap. He watched as it spoke good things endlessly, but its heart was filled with resentment when he searched the soul light. It wanted to find someone to get rid of Chu Feng in the future. Although it wanted to conceal the emotions in the soul light, Chu Feng was too strong. It couldn't conceal it at all, so it was killed. In addition, if it wasn't for it, the positions of the people around Chu Feng wouldn't have been deduced. And you? Chu Feng fixed his eyes on another divine teacher. He picked him up like he was grabbing a little chick. There wasn't anything to be said. He gave him a beating first before saying anything else. Next, he began to interrogate. In the end, he saw the resentment in this old divine teacher's soul light boiling. He had nothing to say and kicked him to death. The whole ship was silent. Everyone was completely annihilated by Chu Feng. The people of the past, the relatives and friends who left behind too many touching and amusing words in my life, I'm collecting debts for all of you. I'm slaughtering the gods here. Chu Feng said softly. He had held back a lot of words in his heart, and they rushed out along with the depressed air. From then on, he began to harvest gods and take revenge for his relatives and friends. At the same time, his harvest this time wasn't small. He killed 11 gods and pieced together the method to activate the celestial venerables' decree from their soul light. This thing was a double-edged sword. If used well, he might be able to suddenly kill a great enemy in the Yang realm, but if he didn't do it well, the other party would control it and seize it back. It would be disastrous for him. Fortunately, he had the stone box now. He placed the decree in the box and isolated it from the gods in the outside world. No one could activate it, so it was equivalent to sealing it first. Whoosh! Chu Feng entered the space of the stone box and drove it away at an extremely fast speed, disappearing into the boundless sea of chaos. After a short while, even though there were law fragments on the big brass ship, after losing the protection of the celestial venerable's decree, it couldn't resist the corrosion of various orders in the primal chaos. In the end, it disintegrated and turned into fine powder with a loud bang. When the matter was done, Chu Feng left the scene of the incident and entered the dilapidated primal chaos again. The gods on the ship were all dead, and their subordinates were also completely annihilated. No one knew what happened here. The Taiwu descendant has come? I can just borrow their heads and use the celestial venerable's bloodline to comfort my relatives and friends in the underworld. Chu Feng said to himself. In this dilapidated universe, no matter if it was a god or a divine king, they were all his targets, let alone the Taiwu descendant. He had to hunt them to the end. At the same time, he also began to scout. It was time to enter the Yang realm. He had to kill all the gods and sneak over. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.